Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I can't recall how many times I told myself that no call would ever shake me the way this one did. It was just after midnight when dispatch's voice crackled in my ear. A soft, almost weary whisper through the static that set every hair on my neck at attention. Unit 42, welfare check requested. Mrs. Finch on Highway 281, Blanco County, Code 2 response. I thumbed the mic. Copy that, dispatch, ETA 5. The dashboard lights danced across the windshield, illuminating a ribbon of asphalt flanked by mesquite and cedar trees that vanished into the Texas darkness. The drive out felt ordinary at first. My Ford Interceptor humming along, radio off, moonlight weaving through the treetops. Humidity clung to my uniform, making the fabric in my armpits damp. I sipped lukewarm coffee from a thermal mug, the bitterness grounding me. I'd been on night shift for 15 years by then, seen my share of drunks passed out on porches, worried neighbors who'd misread an owl's hoot for something sinister, pitchers of lemonade left out for trick-or-treaters well past Halloween. But something about the way dispatch said Mrs. Finch's name had a brittle edge to it. Like she was forcing herself not to reveal how unnerved she was. By the time I turned off the highway onto the gravel driveway, the stars had sunk behind a veil of clouds. The only light came from the porch lamp swinging in the breeze, its bulb flickering as if unsteady. I cut the engine and slid out, boots crunching the loose stones. My hand hovered over my holster even before I reached for the flashlight. Call it habit. Call it paranoia. Doesn't matter. You learn to respect every darkened doorway. The screen door creaked when I knocked, a groan too loud in the silence. I raised my voice, careful to keep it calm. Mrs. Finch, this is Officer Mercer with Blanco County Sheriff's Office. I'm here for your welfare check. Inside, I heard a shuffle, soft and hesitant. The door swung open to reveal a frail woman, barely 5 feet tall, silver hair pulled into a tight bun. Her nightdress was dotted with faint stains, flour from her kitchen, I guessed, or maybe remnants of tea. But it was her eyes I noticed first, wide, unfocused, darting over my shoulder as if expecting someone to materialize behind me. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, voice quivering. I didn't know what else to do. I nodded, keeping my tone gentle. "No problem, ma'am. Do you want to step inside and tell me what's going on?" She waved me through, and I crossed the threshold into a small foyer, scented with lavender lotion and musty wood. Every step I took echoed on the glossy hardwood floor. The living room beyond was dim, only a single lamp by an armchair casting a pool of yellow light. Lace curtains framed the windows, and beyond them I could make out the silhouette of a wind chime swaying in the night breeze. She led me to that armchair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Behind her, an unplugged radio sat on a side table, its dial frozen at some late-night talk station. "It started a week ago," she said, voice barely more than a breath. My Walter, he visits me." I sank onto a sofa opposite her, keeping my flashlight trained on the radio as much as on her. "Visits you how, Mrs. Finch?" Her lips trembled. I hear him breathing. I see him standing by my bed. I wake up to the weight of his gaze. I swallowed, reminding myself that my job was to listen, to assess, to reassure. Sometimes, when we lose someone we love, our mind can play tricks. Shadow, sounds, but they feel real. I leaned forward. Do you think you might be imagining it? She shook her head, eyes glistening with tears. I've heard him say my name. I've felt him brush my hair. She looked toward a closed doorway down the hall. I was too afraid to walk in that room alone. I flicked on my flashlight and eased toward the doorway. The hallway light bulb overhead flickered weakly before dying, plunging even the hall into darkness. I paused, heart thudding. Stay here, I said, voice low. I'll take a look. She watched, knuckles white on the armrests as I approached. The floor beneath me was smooth, polished oak, cold under my boots. At the door, I trained the beam across peeling wallpaper, a grandfather clock ticking softly in a corner. The bedroom door was closed. I placed a hand on the knob and turned it. It swung open with a soft groan. Moonlight spilled through thin curtains onto a neatly made bed. The covers were pulled taut, the pillows plumped and inviting. But what caught my eye was the radio on the nightstand. It was the same one in the living room, yet here it sat, cord trailing beneath the dresser. I squinted. Then I spotted the power cord. It dangled, unplugged, limp against the floor. My pulse quickened. I flicked the radio switch on. Only silence answered. I stepped in further, sweeping the beam over faded floral wallpaper and a dresser strewn with photographs, black and white portraits of a younger Mrs. Finch, smiling beside a tall, mustached man. Walter, I murmured. That would be him. Behind me, the front door slammed so hard it rattled the walls. I jumped, spinning toward the sound, hand on holster. In the living room, I saw Mrs. Finch standing in the doorway, face pale. He's here, she whispered. Her eyes were fixed on something behind me. I turned slowly. The beam traced empty air, no figure, no shadow, just the radio's silent presence. Then the hairs on my arms prickled as a low sigh drifted through the room. Soft, mournful, unmistakably human. My mouth went dry. I swallowed hard, stepping back toward Mrs. Finch. Ma'am, we need to get you out of here, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'll escort you to my car. She nodded, stepping toward me, fingers brushing mine. As we passed the radio, I heard it click on, static hissing, then a voice so faint I almost missed it. Anna. I froze. Mrs. Finch looked at me, tears streaming. That's him, she whispered. That's Walter. I scooped her arm gently and led her down the hall. Outside, the night air hit me like a wall, warm, thick, alive with cicada song. I guided her to the car and buckled her seatbelt. My radio crackled. Unit 42, respond. Are you okay? Backup is 2 minutes out. I tapped the mic. Dispatch, I'm escorting Mrs. Finch to my cruiser. I'm going to wait here till backup arrives. I climbed in beside her. She stared at the dark tree line, lips quivering. I considered taking her statement right there, but something in her eyes told me that was useless. Instead, I sat in silence, radio scanning other calls, nothing that mattered. Every minute stretched like a lifetime. When backup pulled up, I motioned them over. 2 deputies stepped out, questioning faces pale in the headlights. I pointed toward the house. They entered with rifles drawn. I stayed by Mrs. Finch, offering water, a blanket. She sipped slowly, staring straight ahead. 10 minutes later, the deputies came back. No one in the house. No sign of Mrs. Finch or Walter. They found the bed neatly made, no footprints on the floor. In the radio's place, on the dresser, they discovered a folded note. He's waiting. I felt bile rise. I don't know how they did it, but somewhere between me and the house, Mrs. Finch and that note had appeared. When I unfolded it, the handwriting wavered, jagged. He's waiting. I filed the report, but the hard facts didn't make sense. Friends and neighbors said Mrs. Finch lived alone since Walter's heart attack last July. No close family, no visitors. The grave had been filled weeks ago, headstone weathered and blue bonnets placed at its base. I was off the case after 2 days, told to move on, but every shift since I felt a pull toward that house. I passed by twice during daylight, no sign of life. Porch sagging, curtains drawn, the radio in the living room, unplugged in both places. 15 years on the force, and I've never been so unsettled. That night, I found myself back at the station, logbook in hand, scribbling notes none of my superiors would believe. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. Around 3 a.m., the station fell silent. Computers humming, phones dormant. I leaned back, eyes heavy, when the dispatch console lit up. Static, then the voice, soft, familiar, impossibly close. Officer Mercer. It wasn't on the channel I monitored. My heart slammed. "Who is this?" I cursed, flipping switches. The voice sighed. "Where's Anna?" And then, "He's lonely." The mic trembled in my hand. I cleared my throat, voice shaking. "Answer me, who is this?" Silence. Then click, the line went dead. In that moment, every story I'd ever dismissed as folklore crashed through my mind. Some calls you can't file under unfounded. Some voices you can't trace. And some nights, no matter how many you've worked, will haunt you forever. Whenever I close my eyes now, I see that room. The radio's static glow, the photograph of Walter smiling beside his wife, the open door to a darkness that doesn't belong to this world. And I wonder, is it really the dead who come back to us at night, or something far worse? The hours after that late-night call blurred together into a waking nightmare I couldn't escape. I tried to chalk it up to fatigue, the kind that creeps into your bones after back-to-back 12-hour shifts under fluorescent lights and the drone of dispatch radios. But the moment I shut my eyes, I was back in that silent house in Blanco County. Porch lamp swinging, lace curtains stirring, Walter's voice whispering through an unplugged radio. I remember staring at the station clock as my mind spiraled, 04:32 hours. The world around me felt suspended, like I was caught between 2 beats of a hummingbird's wings. My partner, Deputy Reyes, was snoring softly in the passenger seat, oblivious to the unraveling case I was fixated on. I glanced at her through the rearview mirror. Her uniform crisp despite the late hour, holster snug, handcuffs hanging at her side. I envied her solitude and sleep, the way her chest rose and fell evenly. I could only imagine the nightmares she'd avoid. I tapped the dashboard, silencing the restless static that had replaced the familiar hum of my Ford Interceptor's engine. I needed to shake it off. "Let's head back to the station," I muttered, voice rough. "I'm beat." She stirred, gave me a lopsided smile. "Night shift blues, huh?" She yawned. "Don't let the midnight whisperers get you." "Yeah," I said, forcing a laugh, but I didn't believe it. Those whisperers had sunk their talons into me the moment I heard that familiar timbre, that stilted whisper, "Anna." We pulled into the lot at 05:15, and I left Reyes to finish logging our last call. I wanted nothing more than to collapse behind my desk and bury myself in reports so dull I couldn't even remember writing them. Instead, I found myself scrolling through digital maps of Blanco County homes, 3D satellite views, property lines, anything that might jog a memory. I scanned Mrs. Finch's address, noting the circumference of her lot, the proximity of her neighbors. There weren't any close enough for a quick dash between houses. The more I looked, the more isolated her home seemed. By the time sunlight seeped through the blinds, I hadn't moved from my chair. My partner had gone home. Dispatch had shifted to day shift voices, crisp and bright as morning birdsong. But between phone calls and petty disputes, lost wallets, barking dogs, I could feel that constant undercurrent of dread. Every chirp of the radio, every phone ring felt like a summons back to that house. Finally, around 0900, I told my lieutenant I was heading back out to follow up on the Finch call. He gave me a skeptical look when I mentioned the note. He's waiting. I braced for the eye roll that usually came with paranormal nonsense. Instead, he sighed and said, "Mercer, take Reyes with you. Don't burn out. And keep it procedural." "Understood, sir." By 1,000 hours, Reyes and I were back in my interceptor, coffee fresh and hot in residue-stained cups. We drove out to the Finch property in silence, passing the same mesquite and cedar groves we'd traversed last night. The winding country road was quiet at this hour, dew glistening on the shoulder grass. When we arrived, the house looked abandoned. No light in the window, no sign of movement, no cars in the drive. I felt my pulse quicken, the air thick as syrup. The porch light was off, the door shut tight. I dropped my window and breathed deeply. The scent of earth and sagebrush filled my nostrils, but beneath it was a faint trace of lavender and something heavier, stale air like a room closed for days. "Pretty eerie, huh?" Reyes said, snapping me out of my reverie. She scanned the yard with her flashlight. "You sure you want to go inside again?" I glanced at her, saw concern flicker across her features. "Yeah, let's take a look." We stepped onto the porch. The boards groaned underfoot. I produced my key ring. No sign of forced entry, just the lock turning with a familiar click. Inside, I swept my light across the living room. Same lamp, same armchair, radio gone. I frowned. Reyes pointed to the side table where it had sat last night. Empty. "Maybe they took it out front," she suggested. We checked the foyer, the kitchen. Nothing. I checked my notes. Photographs of Mrs. Finch and Walter were supposed to be on that nightstand. Now, there was only an empty outline, like a ghost had reached out and swept everything off. My heart pounded. "Something's not right," I muttered. We moved down the hall to the bedroom. Reyes kicked it open, flashlight trembling. The bed was unmade, covers tossed aside. A cold draft drifted under the door. I swallowed and stepped in. The walls looked the same. Faded yellow, floral borders, but the dresser was bare. The photographs were gone. Only the pillow remained, plump, indented slightly on the right side, as if someone had been resting there. Reyes exhaled. "This is messed up." I knelt by the bed, ran my gloved fingers over the pillow. The fabric felt cool and slightly damp. I pulled out my notepad. "When did you say they found the note?" I asked her. "Last night. Third deputy who came through the door said the note was on the pillow." She shivered. Spelled out in shaky handwriting. "He's waiting." I rose slowly, sweeping the flashlight across the room. Something glinted on the floor beneath the bed. I crouched, peering into the gloom. It was a thin, curling strip of paper. I reached out and picked it up. My breath caught. It was a torn chunk of a photograph. The corner of Walter's face, mustache curling into a faint smile. The paper was fragile, edges jagged as if ripped from a larger print. Refrigerated fear chilled my veins. "Where the hell did this come from?" Reyes murmured. I turned the photograph over. On the back, scrawled in the same shaky script, "Thank you for coming." My stomach knotted. I slid the photograph into an evidence bag. "We need to keep looking." Across the room, something shifted. A faint hiss, like fabric rubbing against floorboards. I raised my light, heart pounding so loud I thought it would break my ribs. The corner of the dresser door, previously closed, was now ajar. I took slow steps over. The door creaked open of its own accord, revealing inside a pile of unfolded laundry and a small wooden box tucked behind shirts. I extracted the box carefully. It was carved from oak, polished smooth by time. No lock, no hinges, just a delicate lid with a faint inscription. For my Anna. I closed my eyes briefly. Anna was Mrs. Finch's name, her given name before she married Walter. I showed the box to Reyes. "What do you think?" She shook her head. "I don't think normal applies here anymore." I pried the lid open. Inside, nestled in velvet lining, was a silver locket. I crushed the velvet with gloved fingers to extract it. The locket was heart-shaped, engraved with tiny floral patterns. My thumb flicked it open, revealing 2 miniature photographs. On one side, a young Mrs. Finch, hair the color of copper, laughing. On the other, Walter, eyes bright, standing tall in a World War II-era uniform. I stared at the images as if they might whisper secrets. Something about them flickered in the flashlight's beam, like a breath, a movement. I forced myself to close the locket and slip it into an evidence bag. Reyes and I backed out of the room, door clicking shut behind us. Down the hallway, I heard a faint hum, the radio from last night surely playing, except we hadn't seen it yet. My pulse raced. I looked at her. She met my eyes. "Want me to check the living room?" I nodded. She moved ahead, and I followed at a distance. We re-entered the living room. The lamp was off, the shadows deep. By the side table sat the radio, crackling softly now, static dancing in the otherwise silent house. I risked a step forward, hand twitching toward my holster. I reached out and tapped the radio. It thumped under my knuckles. I flipped the switch off. Silence swallowed us. No crackle, no whisper. Absurdly, I felt relief. Then the tone changed. A single, resonant note, like a gong, issued forth. It was Mrs. Finch's voice, slow and distant. "Come find me." My blood turned to ice. I staggered back as the note echoed again. "Come find me." Reyes grabbed my arm. "We need to go, now." We bolted out the front door, radio humming again behind us. We didn't stop until we reached my cruiser. I fumbled with the doors, fumbling my keys, heart pounding so hard I thought I'd black out. Finally, inside, we locked the doors and gunned the engine. As we sped down the gravel drive, I looked back. The porch light blinked on and off, casting an erratic glow over the empty house. I swallowed, turning to Reyes. "Report this as unexplained activity. We'll get forensics out here. Maybe find fingerprints on the locket, the photograph, that wooden box." She nodded, eyes wide. "What's going to happen, Nick?" I closed my eyes, pressing my head back against the seat. "I don't know," I whispered. "But I'm not letting this go. I need to find Anna." Later that day, I pored over historical records in the station's cramped database room. Mrs. Finch's full name, Anna Claire Finch, came up in census records, marriage certificates, death notices. She'd been born in 1932, married Walter in 1954. He'd passed away in July of last year. No other children, no close relatives listed in county records. Her obituary had been brief, a single paragraph in the local paper. I scribbled notes on a legal pad, last known address, phone numbers, next of kin fields, blank. I searched neighboring counties, no Finch. It was like the Finches existed only in that little house on Highway 281. By late afternoon, I felt the weight of every minute pressing down on me. My phone buzzed incessantly. Text messages from dispatch, voicemails from worried deputies. I filtered them all, focusing only on Mrs. Finch, the photograph, the box, the locket, the note. I stuffed the items into my coat pocket and slipped out of the building before sunset. I needed to see the house in daylight, to let sunlight reclaim some of the dark, to see if normal could prevail. But as I reached the gravel drive, I hesitated. My hands shook, as I fished out my badge and keys. I placed them on the patrol car hood. I couldn't face that house again tonight. Not alone. Not until I had reinforcements and more equipment. I walked down the road, shoulders slumped, sunlight paling the horizon. Somewhere behind me, the house waited, empty and silent, its secrets hidden behind walls that had witnessed more than any report could ever record. I slipped back into the cruiser and drove away, but in my mind I heard her voice again, soft and pleading. "Come find me." And I realized the chase had only just begun. I spent the next 48 hours in a haze of paperwork, coffee, and low-grade panic. I couldn't shake the feeling that every second I wasn't on that property made whatever waited behind its walls grow stronger. By 2 days after our second visit, I had assembled a small strike team. Deputy Reyes, 2 CSI techs, Carver and Singh, and a chaplain for psychological support. We arranged for an unmarked SUV and a flatbed for the evidence. We brought portable lights, body cams, thermal scanners, and an array of microphones. I even insisted on renting a digital spirit box, though I was careful to call it a frequency scanner in front of my lieutenant, who'd already raised an eyebrow at the phrase, "haunted house." On the morning we returned, the sky was steel gray, a heavy overcast that promised rain. It was March the 22nd, 10:17 a.m. I parked near the end of the driveway and waited, hands gripping the steering wheel knuckles white, as Reyes pulled in behind me. Carver and Singh jumped down from the flatbed, carrying equipment racks and rolling black cases. The chaplain, Father Brooks, had a kindly face and carried a small wooden cross in his pocket, something I'd asked him to keep hidden. "Nick," he said quietly, crossing the front of the car to lean in, "you sure you're ready for this?" I exhaled, trying to sound casual. "Ready or not, I don't have a choice. She called for me." He nodded. "Let's get at it then." We moved in formation toward the front door. My team knew the protocols. Canvass the perimeter first, then breach, secure zones, document everything. I led, hand on my holster, eyes sweeping the facade. The house looked the same, weathered vinyl siding, a sagging roof. The porch lamp was burned out. I noted it for the maintenance request. There was no sign of forced entry, no footprints aside from our own gravel tracks. I held up a gloved hand. "Listen." We froze. The wind rustled the cedar limbs, but beneath that I thought I heard something softer. A faint creak, like floorboards settling, and then a whisper so low I almost doubted it. "Anna?" Deputy Reyes glanced at me. I nodded. We approached the door, Reyes unlocking it as I signaled Singh to power on the lights. The living room blossomed in glare, dust motes dancing in the beams. Carver immediately went to set up the video rig, while Singh spread floor markers. I stepped inside with Reyes close behind. The radio was nowhere to be seen. Instead, on the side table sat an old apple, brown and shriveled, as if it had been there a month. I crouched to inspect it. No mold, just a leathery skin that cracked under my glove. I bagged it, puzzled. Reyes scanned the shelves, empty picture frames, ashes of burned candles, and the locket. There it gleamed, half buried in a ring of melted wax. I lifted it. The cruciform chain was fused to candle drippings. I closed it, careful not to flip it open. Carver snapped photos. Singh dusted for prints that never showed. The chaplain prayed quietly in the corner, voice low. I motioned to the hallway. "Let's move." The team followed me to the bedroom door. It stood barely ajar, the brass knob dull with age. I kicked it open. Inside, the bed was made, but the pillow bore depression, fresh. I stepped to the nightstand, empty. No radio, no note, but the wooden box lay open on the floor where I'd last left it. Inside, the velvet cushion was gone. The silver locket was missing. My heart thundered. I scanned the shelves. Nothing. On the wall, I noticed a small patch of fresh plaster where a picture frame must have hung. I peeled back the wallpaper. Behind it, scratched into the plaster, were the letters ANNA. The letters looked gouged, as if by fingernails, deep and jagged, and I felt bile rise as I read them. Reyes touched my arm. "Nick." I shook my head, throat tight. "Panther Unit," I called into my radio. "We found the wall inscription. Anna's name carved here. Need more manpower." Static crackled. "Copy. Unit 42. K9 unit en route." I turned back to the room. On the bedspread, I saw indentations in a perfect semicircle, as if someone had been kneeling, facing the wall. My flashlight beam lingered there, cold sweat trickling down my spine. Below the window, I saw footprints in the dust. Bare prints, one set. They stopped at the wall, no return path. I retraced them. They led to a pair of old ballet shoes, white, satin-yellowed, lace undone, tucked under the bed. I reached down, pulling them out. The soles were worn, imprinted with tiny heel taps. I bagged the shoes as evidence, noting the time, 10:42 a.m. Every second felt like a mile. Then my radio buzzed. "K9 unit is rolling in. ETA 5 minutes. How copy?" "Copy," I said, trying to steady my voice. "All units secure perimeter." I turned away and realized everyone was staring at me. Carver, Singh, Reyes, even Father Brooks. I felt conspicuous, like I carried a signal flare on my jacket. I forced a shrug. "Let's check the rest of the house." We swept through the kitchen, where an unplugged toaster lay open on the counter, wires splayed in a mock grin. On the floor, I found a twisted photograph. Mrs. Finch at a grocery store, pushing a cart. Someone had scratched through her face with a knife, gouging out the eyes. I stifled a groan and called for Carver to bag it. In the living room, I found new footprints, muddy, small, trailing from the back door. I kicked aside the rug and saw damp soil tracked across the floorboards. That door led to the yard, where neighbor surveys said no one could approach unnoticed for at least 10 yards without being seen. I snapped photos. "Reyes, check the property record. Who owns that land behind the house?" She tapped her tablet. "No structures, but it's part of the Finch estate. Abandoned orchard, fenced off." I frowned. So anyone going in there would have to scale the fence or come through the house. I looked at the footprints. They stopped at the back door, then resumed on the other side. Someone had clearly crossed during the night. Back in the bedroom, Singh held up a magnifying lamp to the windowsill. "These scratches look fresh. Something heavy was dragged along here." He swept the light down and gasped, pointing. "What's that?" I moved in. On the floor, hidden in the corner shadow, was a tattered piece of a dress. White lace, 2-inch strip, stained faintly with red rust. I bagged it. My radio crackled. K9 unit on site. A baying came through, deep and urgent. I led the group outside, where 2 deputies stood by a tan German shepherd, leash taut. Lieutenant Harris strode up. "What have we got?" I handed him the locket bag. "Fine so far. Carved initials, broken picture, ballet shoes, scraps of dress. Footprints in the dust and mud. Someone, or something, has been in and out of this house several times in the last 72 hours. He frowned, rubbing his jaw. "History on this property?" I relayed what I knew. The Finches, Walter's death, Anna's disappearance. When I finished, he stared at the house. "Send a squad through the orchard. Let's grit it." I nodded. "Sir?" Reyes and I walked to the back gate. The fence was chain link, 6 feet high, drooping on one side. I lifted the latch and pushed through. The orchard was overgrown. Rows of gnarled trunks, blossoms long gone. The ground was churned, as if something had been digging. We swept flashlights across dirt mounds, broken branches. I felt an inhuman chill, like the world had gone blind. The canine team followed, dog sniffing the air. It was silent except for the dog's panting. Then a howl, a sudden, keening cry so mournful it felt as if the sky wept. The dog bolted forward, dragging its handler. I chased after, adrenaline spiking. We caught up near an old well. The dog pawed at loose stones, nose buried in darkness. I shone my light in. The well was empty, save for slick moss on the walls. The dog whimpered, head lowered. I peered into the void and thought I saw movement, something glimmering at the bottom. But seconds later it was gone. My comms buzzed. "Command to Unit 42. What's your status?" I swallowed. "Securing perimeter. Possible evidence in the orchard well. We need a ladder and a harness." Harris's voice crackled. "Copy. Hang tight." I climbed back out of the well, feeling like I'd left a piece of my soul down there. We gathered at the orchard edge, deputies marking the area off with crime scene tape. I stared at the house looming in the gray light, its windows like dark eyes watching us. By late afternoon, we'd collected dozens of items: the locket, the ballet shoes, the photograph fragments, the lettered scribbles, the dress scrap, the apple, soil samples. Forensics loaded them into evidence vans. I signed off on the chain of custody, but my mind was elsewhere. Driving away, I felt hollow. I'd replayed the day's events 100 times. The whisper in the living room, the scratched letters, the dress in the bed corner, the dog's howl at the well. None of it made sense, unless you admitted the impossible. I taped a single piece of evidence to my dashboard, the ballet shoes. Every time I glanced at them, I remembered the tiny indentations on the soles, as if someone had danced in death inside that room. That night, laying in my bunk at home, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the air conditioner. My phone buzzed, a text from dispatch. "Unmarked call for you. 281 highway, are you coming back?" My heart stuttered. I stared at my reflection in the dark. My uniform hung in the corner, untouched. I didn't answer, but I heard her voice again, as clear as if she stood beside me. "Come find me." And I realized I would, no matter what it took, to uncover the truth buried in that house and in my own 22 years of silence. I should have known sleep wasn't going to come. My bunk at home felt too quiet, too still, like the calm before a storm. Midnight passed in restless tossing, my mind replaying every detail from the day's sweep: the carved initials, the ballet shoes, the gouged photograph, the torn scrap of lace. By 0300 hours, I was sitting at my kitchen table under the pale glow of the fridge light, sifting through the evidence photos on my laptop. All the while, the silence pressed in, and somewhere in the back of my skull I heard her voice again. "Come find me." I sent a terse text to Deputy Reyes, briefing 900 at station, and poured 2 black coffees before dawn. The drive-in was cold, the world still half asleep beneath a gray Texas sky. At 0852, I met Reyes, Carver, Singh, and Father Brooks in the locker bay. Sergeant Wallace hovered at the edge of the group, arms crossed, brows furrowed. He gave me a silent nod when I walked in. No questions. He'd seen that look on me before. That grim determination that meant something was deeply wrong. We gathered around a makeshift whiteboard in the briefing room. I traced the timeline. Last call at 0017 on April 14th. First site sweep 6 hours later. forensic catalog over the next 48 hours, the orchard grid search uncovering the well, the orchard footprints, the smash and grab of the locket and the ballet shoes. I emphasized the impossibilities, the unplugged appliances activating on their own, the remote lock inscription, the seemingly suicidal footprints that never returned. Carver kept glancing at the board, lips pressed in a thin line. Singh scrolled through the thermal scans from our last sweep. All that came up was interference, cold spots and heat signatures that blinked in and out, like someone or something, cutting in and out of reality. Tonight, I concluded, we're going back with full night vision thermal imaging, K9 support, and body cams on 24/7. We lock down the perimeter, bring in SWAT alert level, and station audio tech at 3 points inside and outside the house. No one enters without authorization. I looked each of them in the eye. Because I believe Anna Finch is still here, in some form, and she's trying to tell us something. Father Brooks cleared his throat softly. Nick, I'll be offering ministry support, but no, I'm also carrying a digital recorder. If there's any voice phenomena, we'll have it on tape. He tapped the recorder embedded in his leather Bible cover. I nodded, grateful for the chaplain's professional caution. By dusk, the strike team assembled at the Finch property again. Black SUVs and a marked patrol car lined the gravel drive. Sheriff's tech vans idled white light, blinking, streaming cable to our command post. I watched Reyes coordinate K9 deployment, the German shepherd sniffing the perimeter fence, ears pricked for anything unusual. Singh and Carver unloaded gear, tripods, mics, thermal scopes, infrared lamps. Even the local news crew showed up, though Sergeant Wallace politely told them no comment until the morning. We couldn't risk a leak. The public didn't need to know every detail of a case that already skirted the edge of what any sane person would call normal. We moved in under cover of early night. At 19:34 hours, I unlocked the front door and stepped into familiar dread. My flashlight beam bounced off the living room walls, picking out dust motes and the empty side table where the radio once sat. Everything was in place, down to the unlit lamp and the red-tinged clock that read 7:35 p.m. I set up the first mic near the doorway, wiring it to a portable recorder. Singh positioned a thermal camera in the corner, angled to cover the hall and living room. Carver placed 2 GoPros high on the ceiling, their little red lights blinking to show they were live. "Sound check," I said, clicking on my own body cam. 1, 2, 3, go. My voice sounded hollow in the cavernous stillness. "Officer Mercer, call sign Unit 42. Beginning sweep at 7:40 p.m. April 17th. I swept my flashlight to the hallway. "All units, keep comms open." Reyes followed me in, her expression serious. "Quiet sweep," she whispered. "We don't want to spook anything." We cleared the living room, scanning every shadow-draped corner. The wooden floors creaked under our boots. The air had a faint chill, like the house was exhaling. We advanced to the hallway where the light bulb had been blacked out. I fitted my NVG monocular rig and flicked it on. The world turned green, textures sharpening. At the end of the hall, the bedroom door stood ajar, a sliver of fluorescent green beckoning. I checked my watch, 7:47 p.m., and signaled Reyes to stay back. I pushed the door open. Inside, the bed was neatly made, the pillow plump except for a small indentation on the far right. My thermal scope picked up a lingering cold spot there, colder than the room's ambient temperature, as if someone, or something, had just vacated. I crouched to inspect the bed. "Thermal anomaly," I murmured into my mic. "Nitrogen level cold spot at foot of bed." I snapped photos with my checkpoint cam. Reyes crossed the room, shining an extra light on the dresser. The wooden box lay open again, empty. I lifted the lid higher. "Empty," I reported. "No locket." Shivers crawled up my spine. I closed the box and bagged it for later. Suddenly, a low sigh, soft, almost human, floated through the room. My NVG rig caught a flicker near the window. I swung my head-mounted light. Nothing, just the pale curtains moving as if someone breathed on them from the other side. My stomach coiled. "Did you hear that?" I hissed. Reyes nodded, jaw clenched. We backed out, leaving the door open. The strike team moved to cover points. K-9 trooper at the front, Carver by the living room mic station, Singh scanning the hall in thermal. I stationed myself in the foyer, mic clipped to my collar, radio at the ready. The hours ticked by in static-filled hush. I checked the time, 11:13 p.m. Carver's monitor flickered as he pored over sound waves. Reyes sipped thermos coffee in restless vigilance. Singh whispered updates. Small heat signature mapped to the closet at end of a hall. Brief, under 2 seconds. No visible intruder. Father Brooks sat in the corner with his recorder, reading from a worn prayer book. I watched his lips move silently, mindful of his vow to catch anything on tape. I wondered if faith could hold at bay the creeping dread. At 1:02 a.m., the first chime of hell. The radio at the side table in the living room crackled to life, static ripping through our calm. I spun on my heel, mouth dry. "Radio activation, living room side table," I yelled. "Carver, audio, Reyes, converge." We rushed in. Singh's thermal camera showed nothing alive, yet the radio's dials spun on their own, hissing. Carver lunged, flipping the switch off. Silence slammed back like a door. I lunged for the radio, ripping it free from its stand. No power cord. I dropped it in evidence bag. Behind me, the closet door at a hall's end creaked open a crack. My radio mic crackled. "Officer Mercer." A sharp voice broke through static. My name, reverberating. I drew my sidearm, sweeping my light toward the closet. Reyes froze beside me, hand on her holster. I stepped forward, bullet ready. "Show yourself," I barked. The closet door trembled. Then from inside came a soft whisper. Her voice, shattered and trembling. "Nick, help me." My heart lurched. I burst forward, yanking the closet door wide. Inside, empty coat hangers clanged. Spiders scuttled across the wood. No Anna, but scrawled on the back wall in deep gouges, "Please." Blood dark in the grooves. Reyes grabbed my arm. "We need to get out now," she breathed. I stepped back, torchlight illuminating the word. My boots crunched on shards of plaster. I realized I was shouting into my mic, "We have lettering. Distress note inside closet, please." We're pulling out, repeat pull out, red team evac. Through the hallway, we sprinted back to the foyer as the overhead GoPros cut to static. My NVG flashed once, then blinked out. Panic hammered in my ears. I barreled through the front door into the night air, the cold hitting my face like a slap. The K-9 unit took off after me, barking, searching for scent. I staggered to the patrol SUV, nearly tripping over the threshold. Reyes slammed the door shut, keyed the ignition. We peeled away, tires spitting gravel. As we rounded the bend, I watched the Finch house recede into darkness, its windows like empty eye sockets. At 1:10 a.m., sirens wailed as SWAT cruisers and forensics vans converged behind us. But I didn't wait. I needed distance. I needed time to think. My radio crackled to life with frantic voices. I sent a terse reply, "I'm off the grid. Will debrief at station." Back at headquarters, I stripped off my gear in the bullpen, skin crawling. I placed the radio, the wooden box, and the ballet shoes on the evidence table under the fluorescent lights. The closet inscription, "Please." I still had the photo on my phone. I couldn't look at it for long. Father Brooks found me by the coffee machine. He laid a hand on my shoulder. "You did right by her," he said quietly. His voice trembled like he'd seen too much. I nodded, voice hollow. "She's not gone," I whispered. "She's still here." He watched me, eyes sad. "Then we'll find her." I finally allowed my adrenaline to subside enough to schedule the final assault. A full SWAT team, night vision, tactical shield, backup K9, a field exorcist if needed. We'd breach, secure, and if necessary, burn the house down. Yet as I stared at the pile of evidence, I couldn't shake the feeling that Anna, and whatever else called her name, would slip away again. Because some presences want to be found, and some want to be worshipped in darkness. The clock on the desk blinked 2:47 a.m. My shift technically ended in 15 minutes, but I stayed, pencil tapping against the file folder, waiting for the next call, the next whisper, the next impossible sign. And somewhere in the deep hush of the precinct, I thought I heard her voice again, so soft I could hardly believe it. "Nick, don't leave me here alone." I climbed into the unmarked SUV just before dusk, the cab smelling of stale coffee and sweat-damp uniforms. Carver rolled in beside me, camera cases stacked in the back, while Father Brooks settled in the rear, Bible and digital recorder pressed to his chest. Deputy Reyes dropped into the passenger seat checking her gear, flashlight, sidearm, extra magazines. Singh climbed in behind me, thermal monoculars strapped to his belt, radio hooked to his vest. The SWAT team's black vans rumbled into position behind us, engines throbbing low. I pressed the ignition, and the SUV eased down the familiar gravel drive to the Finch house. Every stone, every rut felt like an accusation. Why hadn't we found her yet? The sky was a bruised purple, thunderheads gathering overhead. I killed the lights before we reached the porch. With a nod from Reyes, we slipped out and took up our positions. "Team Alpha, front door," I whispered. Reyes and I led the charge. "Team Bravo, east windows. Team Charlie, orchard perimeter. K9 handler at north gate, audio tech at living room mic station. Let's move." My voice rattled the silence, but nobody hesitated. We advanced in formation. Flashlights off, NVGs on. Through the front yard, boots sinking in dew-slick gravel. Singh's thermal scanner painted the world in electric blues and whites. No heat signatures beyond our own. Carver held a handheld monitor, live streaming to our command posts, and Father Brooks brought up the rear. I reached the rotted porch steps and paused, thumb on the breech ram's grip. My heart fluttered. For 3 nights, the house had swallowed every advance. Tonight, we would either bring Anna home or confirm the worst. Breach in 3, 2, 1. Reyes swung the ram against the doorframe. Wood splintered, and we surged inside. The living room greeted us like a tomb. Motes of dust hung in the air, swirling in our NVG light. The side table was gone. Lord only knew where the radio was now. But the lamp lay shattered on the floor, bulb cracked against the polished boards. Red wax pooled beside it, melted into the shape of a heart. Carver eased in, camera rolling, voice low in my ear. "Live feed on your 6. I swept the room. Framed photographs on the wall, now face down on the floor. Anna and Walter dancing at a spring fair, their smiles frozen in time. Every frame was shattered. I knelt to inspect the shards, my reflection fractured across each sliver of glass. "Alpha, clear living room," I ordered. Reyes covered the far corner, sidearm low. Singh trained thermal on the hallway. I moved to the fireplace mantel, where a lone candle burned black wax spirals into ash. I snapped it off its bracket. Beneath it, carved deeper than before, the letters A-N-N-A glowed in fresh plaster. Anna's name, I murmured. Again. Reyes pressed a gloved finger to the carving. Feels recent. Bravo, east windows, I called. Check entry points. I advanced toward the hallway, torch beam carving through the gloom. Every step echoed. The hallway light bulb overhead flickered, then died, leaving us in emerald green NVG night. At the hall's end, the bedroom door stood wide, a rectangle of darkness. Stack up, I said. Reyes at 3 point, Singh at 6. I pressed my back to the wall and peered inside. The bedroom was worse than I remembered. The bed was torn, sheets shredded, mattress ripped open like a carcass. A crimson stain soaked the pillows. I dared not move closer. On the nightstand, half the drawers were yanked out, strewn across the floor like entrails. The wooden box sat at the foot of the bed, lid pried off, hinges broken. I flicked the broken locket open. The photographs inside were obscured by a film of dust, but I could still make out their faces. I swallowed hard. Look for signs of life, I ordered. Singh swept a thermal across the room. No living heat signatures. Reyes clicked her tongue. But look at these footprints, bear prints cutting across the bed. They leave and then vanish. She shone her light to the far side. In the corner, a single ballet shoe lay upright, sole to ceiling, lace trailing on the floor. I signaled Carver to capture it. Bag it. Then I heard it. A soft cry, so distant I thought I'd imagined. But Reyes heard it too. She spun, flashlight carving an arc toward the door. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, voice tight. "Anna?" No answer. I strode to the closet. Its door was closed. I pressed my ear to it. Silence. I nudged it open. Inside, hangers lined up, yet nothing hung on them. On the back wall, gouged letters spelled, "Please help." Fresh blood oozed from the lines, pooling at the base. I drew in my breath. Alpha to command, inscription marked, blood present, request hazmat suit. "Copy, Unit 42, crackled the radio. Reyes pressed a hand to her mouth as I stepped inside. NVG revealing a shape seated in the shadows on the floor. I braced, sidearm aimed. "Show me your hands," I barked. Slowly, a figure rose, a wrinkled hand wrapped in gauze, gripping a torn dress. "Nick," came the rasp. It was so weak I nearly thought I'd imagined it. Then a woman's voice, cracked with age and trauma. "Help me." My heart leaped. In the green night I saw her, Anna Finch, emaciated, hair matted, dress stained and torn. Her eyes, once bright, were clouded with fear. A single thin leg protruded from behind a collapsed shelf. Her other leg must have been trapped. She looked up at me, mouth opening in a silent plea. "Reyes," I whispered. "Medical." Reyes snapped on her radio. "All units, I have a live subject in closet, Anna Finch, injured, need medevac." I dropped to my knees beside her. Her breath rasped like dry leaves. "Mrs. Finch, I'm here," I said, voice thick. "We're getting you out." She tried to smile, lips cracked. "I knew you'd come." She coughed, gasping. "Walter, he brought me here, said I'd be safe." My vision blurred with relief and horror. I pressed on her arm. "We're safe now. Hang in there." Singh and Reyes worked to free her. Carver scanned the room for cameras. Father Brooks appeared with an officer carrying a trauma kit. I held Anna's trembling hand as Reyes cut away splintered wood. The moment the fragments shifted, Anna cried out, pain sharp and fierce. My stomach lurched. I dug in my pocket for a blanket. "It's okay, ma'am, just breathe." Medics radioed that their rig was 5 minutes out. I wiped sweat from my brow, heart pounding. Outside, distant thunder rumbled. When they finally lifted her onto a stretcher, Anna's head lolled toward me. "Thank you," she whispered, voice barely there. "Don't forget me." "Never," I choked. They loaded her into the ambulance, sirens piercing the night. I watched the taillights vanish around a bend, knowing my job wasn't over. The storm broke in sheets of rain as I led the team back inside. "Secure evidence," I ordered. "We've got her. Now let's document everything." We swept the house again, this time with hazmat and forensics in full. In the living room, we found the unplugged radio tucked beneath the couch, static still faintly hissing through its speaker. On the mantel, a fresh photo. Anna and Walter, smiling in spring sunshine, new, glossy, unframed. I bagged it. In the well behind the orchard, Singh recovered the lens cap Charver dropped last time, and a scrap of lace caught on a root. We cataloged each piece until dawn. Father Brooks prayed over the clues, murmuring blessings. Back at the station, I sat alone in the bullpen, rain pattering against the windows. I stared at the files stacked around me, and my hands still shook from the closet sight. Anna was alive. She'd been trapped in her own home, hidden by some force I couldn't explain. And she'd carved her name, left pleas for help, even called me on that phantom radio. My radio crackled. It was dispatch. "Unit 42, status update on Finch." I tapped the mic. "She's alive, en route to hospital. Injuries non-fatal, but severe. House is secure. I'm bringing my report in 10. "Copy." I ended the call and leaned back, head pounding. Rain dripped through a broken shingle, pattering on the roof like whispered laughter. I closed my eyes and let exhaustion wash over me, my first taste of relief in 72 hours. Then I heard it, soft and clear, though the room was empty. "Nick!" My eyes snapped open. I sat bolt upright, no radio on, no wind blowing. I scanned the bullpen, empty desks, humming computers, a solitary janitor's cart in the corner. Again, "Nick!" Not coming from any device, not through any speaker. It rose from the shadows. My pulse hammered. I reached for my sidearm instinctively, but my hands trembled too much. "Nick, don't leave me here alone." The words weren't born of speakers or static. They echoed inside my skull, a plea and a promise, raw and wounded. I realized that rescue was only the beginning. Anna Finch was out of that closet, but something else remained. Something bound to the walls, the floors, the dust motes swirling in lamplight. Something that whispered in a woman's voice and cradled her broken body. Something that now awaited us all, wherever we went next. And in that moment I understood that some calls never end, and some houses never let go. If you're enjoying these stories and want to hear more, feel free to support me with a super thanks. Even the smallest support really keeps me going. Now, let's jump into the second story. It was October 12th, just after 2:14 a.m., when the first flicker appeared on my dash cam. I was 30 miles outside Fremont, Texas, cruising down Highway 62 in my Ford Explorer patrol unit. Lights muted, but engines humming. Breathing in that thick late-fall humidity that sticks to your skin and tastes like old sweat. I remember hitting the gravel turnout beside the old Mercer farmhouse. Empty for decades, its windows broken and dark, just to stretch my legs and check the oil levels. The radio buzzed once with static, then nothing. I sat there, drinking lukewarm coffee from a styrofoam cup, watching the black horizon lean heavy against the silver moon. That's when I saw it. A shape, tall and thin, pacing beneath the porch light, like a man trying on someone else's coat. At first, I thought it was a trespasser, a drunk kid daring himself into town limits. I killed the engine and clicked my spotlight over the farmhouse, nothing. The beam hit chipped wood, busted shutters, a scattering of rusted farm tools, but no person. My pulse ratcheted up. The dash cam replay froze on that window of footage. The shape lingering at the edge of the porch, head tilted, shoulders hunched. I rubbed my eyes, convinced I was hallucinating. I tossed the coffee out the window, grabbed my flashlight and radio, and told dispatch I was investigating a possible trespass call. No one answered. The gravel crunched under my boots as I approached the main door. I called out, "Fremont PD, anyone home?" My voice sounded tinny, echoing off the empty fields. The flashlight beam jittered against peeling clapboard. I swept it over the horizon, half expecting movement in the cornfield beyond. But only the hush of cicadas, the distant sigh of highway traffic. I pressed my ear to the doorway. Low wind, distant dripping water, but no footsteps. I circled the building, checking every broken window and corner. Still nothing. Back inside the cruiser, I scrolled through the dashcam feed. Frame 57 showed nothing but grain. Frame 58 revealed that lanky silhouette, pressing just inside the camera's field of view. The skinniest man I'd ever seen. Taller than most, with arms swinging too long at his sides. No face, just a darker void where a face should be. I leaned in, heart thumping so hard I thought my ribcage would crack. Then it vanished as quickly as it appeared. For the next week, the routine never changed. Until October 19th at 3:02 a.m. I was stationed in dispatch, reviewing traffic cams along Main Street. The neon sign of Lou's Laundromat buzzed overhead in camera 2, casting a sickly glow onto the sidewalk. Between frames, a tall figure drifted behind the frosted glass, pausing beside the coin change kiosk. I grabbed the radio and keyed. Unit 387 to dispatch, possible person inside closed laundromat, but got nothing but static. When I stepped outside, headlights cut through the mist. I crossed the street in boots slick with dew and yanked at the locked door. Deadbolt secure. No movement inside. I shone my flashlight through the slit of the glass door. Empty baskets, folded clothes, humming machines. And that smell. Dank wood rot mingled with ozone, like a transformer burning somewhere underground. By the 22nd, I'd heard whispers at the jail about the Watcher. I'd retired from corrections last year, but night shift guards still looked at me sideways when I came around for ride-along duties. They'd caught inmates twitching in their bunks, murmuring of a dark man standing at the foot of their beds, staring through the bars. One lifer, Turner, swore. The Watcher leaned in until Turner could feel his breath. Turner's voice trembled when recounting it, something I'd never heard from a man who'd spent 20 years behind bars. I didn't want to believe it, but the timing lined up. Turner saw him at exactly 3:14 a.m., and in my cruiser's log, I'd noted a dashcam flicker at 3:13. Late on October 25th, I decided to bait it. I grabbed my body cam, clipped it onto my uniform, and headed back out. The Miller farmstead, legendary among local kids for ghost stories, was my destination. I pulled up just before 4 a.m., radio silent and lights off. Fog drifted across the ground like slow breath. I stepped out, boots sinking into wet grass, and called aloud, "Sheriff's office, anyone here?" My own words startled me more than any reply would have. I wandered the perimeter, flashlight slicing through the haze. Then, out of nowhere, my cruiser lights blinked on and off, locking itself. I froze. The body cam transmitted live to dispatch. They saw a shadow emerge from the barn, tall and silent, head cocked like a dog listening. I called for backup and took 2 steps forward. The shadow recoiled, slipping into the barn's yawning door. No sound but my own ragged breathing. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I replayed every scrap of footage, every whisper from inmates, every odd creak and flicker in my cruiser. The watcher seemed to shift away when I approached, always baited me out, always vanished before I could close the distance. It was hunting pattern and timing with mechanical precision. Something about the way it lingered under broken lights or outside locked doors made me think it wasn't afraid of exposure. Maybe it craved it. On Halloween, the county went silent. Kids, too spooked to trick-or-treat. Reports ticked in, lights flickering in empty houses, dogs howling at nothing, shadows lunging just beyond porch rails. I stayed on patrol until dawn, lights flashing down every side street, eyes darting to every dark window. At 3:47 a.m., I rolled past Willow Creek Cemetery's open gate. The iron bars groaned in the fog. Against the gravestone stood that shape, unmoving, as if carved from midnight itself. I eased to a stop and reached for my mic. No signal. By the time I flicked on my spotlight, the shape had limped closer, each step slow, limbs bowed at odd angles. My heart pounded so loud I thought the watcher would hear it. I yanked the door open and shouted, "Show yourself!" The beam slashed across headstones, but when it landed on the watcher, it stopped moving, as if the light pinned it against reality. I blinked, and it vanished. When I looked down at my body cam, I saw it slink past the passenger window, head turning just enough to catch the all-too-familiar darkness where its face ought to be. I slammed the cruiser into gear, tires screeching, and tore out of that cemetery like a man possessed. Now, as I speak into this mic, this recorder meant to capture these confessions, I can feel the air shift behind me. The darkness in here seems thicker than it should be. My pulse hasn't slowed. Somewhere, in the night beyond these four walls, the watcher is out there, pacing for its next move. I hit record again and steadied my breathing, though my lungs felt like they'd been packed with gravel. It was November 1st now, creeping toward 2:17 a.m., and the farmhouse lights still hadn't gone back on. I'd driven straight from the cemetery to my sister's old pickup. She lent it to me so I could stash the cruiser and avoid having dispatch trace me back. I didn't want anyone else following me into whatever hell I'd stumbled into. The highway was deserted, save for the rhythm of my engine and the patter of rain beginning to mist across the windshield. The wipers slapped at the glass, but even the drops seemed reluctant tonight, as if nature itself hesitated to disturb the darkness. I punched the heater to high, though it only circulated cold, damp air. My chest tightened. I replayed the dashcam footage in my mind, the watcher's ragged form, the way it leaned in toward the camera, its head tilting like a bird sussing out prey. There'd been no wind in that cemetery, no drafts to make it sway. It stood perfectly still until I rolled up, then it moved. Not running, not walking, but gliding, as if gravity had loosened its grip. Halfway to the edge of town, my radio squawked to life with a kerchunk of static. "Unit 387, dispatch, are you clear?" My gut twisted. "Dispatch, I'm clear." My voice sounded far away, like I'd filmed it days ago. "Copy. We're showing movement on camera 3 at the old Waters house. Wanted you to know." I recognized the name. The Waters house was empty, boarded shut after the fire last year. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the mic. Even in broad daylight, that place looked like a charred husk. At night, it was a maw waiting to swallow you whole. "Got it," I said. "I'll check it out." I cut the ignition and clicked off the lights, letting the night swallow the truck whole. My footsteps crunched over broken glass and charred siding as I approached. My flashlight flickered. The beam caught the skeletal remains of a porch, the blackened ribs of roof joists. The moon slipped behind a cloud, leaving me in semi-darkness. Then, out of the corner of my eye, movement, just a flicker, a silhouette against the broken window. "Show yourself," I called, voice echoing. The watcher didn't reply. I swept the beam inside. I saw nothing, no shape, no shimmer, no reflection, just debris and ash. Yet the damp smell of earth and ozone lingered, like electricity leaking from a buried cable. As I circled the building, my radio hissed again. "Unit 387, can you confirm anything?" "Negative," I said, though the haze of fear had already settled in my throat. "Looks clear." I turned to go, flashlight bobbing in my hand, and froze. A pair of eyes, luminescent and red, hovered in the broken front window. I swallowed, tensed to draw back, but the eyes blinked out before I could register them. My pulse erupted in my ears. I sprinted back to the truck, slammed the door, and locked it. On the drive back to the station, the headlights cut through the rain in long arcs, and I kept expecting to see it standing in the road, arms outstretched, head tilting, watching me with empty black pits for eyes. But the road remained clear. Dispatch hadn't patched through any calls about me or the old Waters place, which meant they either didn't believe me or they were keeping it under wraps. Either way, I felt more alone than ever. When I finally pulled into the station parking lot, it was almost 3:30 a.m. I parked in back, away from the dim security cameras, took off my body cam, and slipped it into my pocket. Inside, the station was silent. Lights low, desks empty, the hum of the AC rattling through the vents. The only movement was my own reflection in the darkened windows, my eyes hollow. I made my way to dispatch to see who was on shift. The supervisor, Officer Ramirez, sat slumped over the console, fast asleep in her chair. I eased a hand onto her shoulder. She jerked awake, eyes wide in confusion. "Long night?" I whispered. She blinked. Where have you been?" Her voice was thick with sleep. "I logged you out hours ago." That stopped me cold. I was on Waters. You patched me through." Ramirez shook her head. "I don't have any record of a dispatch to Waters, or budget reports or anything after midnight. Only the routine patrol checks you logged." My jaw tightened. "So, you're saying it never happened?" She gave me a pitying look. "Jake, you okay? You seem off." I suppressed a curse. "Just listen. Keep an eye on the cameras. If you see anything weird, call me." I slipped away before she could argue. I returned to my cruiser to grab coffee, anything to keep my head clear. As I poured the steaming brew, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Why aren't you answering?" I can't sleep. My fingers shook as I read it. I didn't recognize the number. I typed back, "Who is this?" But the message sent back, "Look outside." My blood turned to ice. I peered through the window. Across the lot, headlights flickered in the fog, dim and wavering. But no cars. Dispatch logs still showed only my sister's pickup parked here. I set my mug down so hard it cracked. I texted, "Tell me your name." No reply. The headlights dimmed, vanished. I backed away, nearly tripping over my own feet. My phone buzzed again. "Your sister's truck is unlocked." A cold sweat broke out across my back. My sister's truck, by right, it should have been locked when I left it. I bolted outside, and sure enough, the driver's door was ajar. My flashlight beam caught the latch swinging in the fog. My breath roared in my ears. I should have run. I should have radioed for backup. Instead, I swung the door shut and pulled at the lock, metal creaking. No prints, no smudges, just the stale fog settling in the cab. The engine had shut off. The keys were gone. My heart slammed. I reached for my backup set in my pocket. My sister's quick-release key fob. The battery was dead. Just a dead click. I was stranded. For a heartbeat, I considered running back inside the station, but something in me compelled me to stay. I turned slowly, flashlight tracing the parking lot. And there, by the station's surveillance camera, I saw it. The watcher, head tilted, arms hanging too long, its body bowed as if collapsing in on itself. I froze. It didn't move a muscle. My radio in my pocket crackled. "Jake! Jake!" A voice, low and hollow, older, raspy. It wasn't Ramirez, not dispatch. It sounded like the watcher itself. Gravely, almost human. That same electricity odor wafted up from my feet, as if power lines were sparking underground. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. Then the watcher moved, gliding across the lot, inch by inch, toward me. The beam of my flashlight skimmed its side. No texture, no clothing. Just a dark void that swallowed the light. It paused halfway, and I could swear I felt the pressure of its gaze pin me in place. "Oh my God," I whispered, voice cracking. The hollow static of my radio voice whispered under it. "Oh my God!" My foot fell back, and I tumbled to the ground, scattering gravel. The watcher leaned down until its featureless face was inches from mine. I saw nothing but that empty blackness. Then, in a flicker, it straightened and vanished, dissolving into the night like smoke blown out by a sudden wind. I scrambled up, spilled coffee steaming on the asphalt, heart pounding so hard it felt like fist blows inside my chest. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, but it redirected me to dispatch. Ramirez picked up on the second ring. "Jake, everything okay?" "No," I gasped. "I need help, now." "Stay where you are. Backup's already on the way." I slid against the truck, palming the cracked mug. The watcher was gone, or so I hoped, but I could still feel its presence lingering in the air, like a bruise. My siren in the distance answered me. Lights spun onto the lot as two cruisers pulled in behind me. I stood, hands shaking. As the officers climbed out, I wanted to warn them, to say, "Don't come any closer, it's here," but I'd lost my voice. Only static on the radio and the low hum of the station AC answered me now. Tonight, the watcher found me. And I wonder what that means for tomorrow. I stopped the recorder then, my hands so unsteady I almost dropped the device. Outside, the rain had picked up to a steady pour. The cruiser's lights painted the wet asphalt with red and blue stripes. I watched those patterns shift, and for a moment I wondered if they were waiting for me, or if I was waiting for them, trapped in this endless cycle of fear. I haven't slept since. The station logs still show no disturbance at Waters or at the lot. Ramirez says I'm overworked, underrested. The inmates at the jail still whisper of the watcher. And somewhere in my mind, I hear my own recorded voice. When it finally finds what it's looking for, will I still be alive to tell the tale? Tonight, when you hear nothing but the creak of an empty hall, remember that silence can be louder than any siren. And if you ever find yourself alone in the dark, listen for a whisper of static, because that might just be all you get. I haven't slept since that night at the station. The fluorescent lights in my apartment flicker like a broken traffic signal, painting the walls in harsh white and uneasy shadows. Every time I close my eyes, I see empty corridors, boarded-up windows, and that silhouette, limbs bent at impossible angles, head cocked, watching. I wake drenched in sweat, my heart racing, convinced I hear footsteps in the hall outside my bedroom door. By 1:30 a.m., I'm up again, scouring my phone for anything, news reports, social media chatter, anything that might prove I'm not losing my mind. Yesterday afternoon, I drove back out to the Waters house with two other horsers, Detective Monroe and Patrolman Lee, both skeptical but professional. The rain had washed away the previous night's mist, leaving muddy tire tracks and the smell of fresh earth. I motioned them forward as we approached the burnt doorway. Monroe shook his head. "Jake, there's nothing here, just charred wood and ash." Lee trained his flashlight inside, eyes narrowed. No movement, no thermal signature, nothing. But I saw it. Wet footprints, leading from the porch to the side yard, as if someone, or something, had lingered there just hours ago. I ran my glove over the ground. The soil felt disturbed, loose in a neat, purposeful line. Monroe bent down to examine them and frowned. "These prints, they're human, size 10 or 12, but they track too shallow, like someone was barely touching the earth." He glanced at me. "Are you sure you want to keep chasing this?" I hated that look. Concern mixed with pity. "I have to," I said. "Something happened here." That night, I volunteered for the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift again, despite ordering it off my schedule. I wanted every hour under the harsh LED lights, monitoring cameras, patrolling Main Street, wandering abandoned lots. The station log shows me clocking in at 9:58, but my body tells me I arrived hours earlier, already tense, already wired. At precisely 2:14 a.m., the comms crackled. A 911 call, no caller ID, location given as 117 South Elm. But the street is residential, quiet, no history of trouble. Dispatch patched it to me. I grabbed my cruiser keys. When I pulled up to Elm Street, the houses stood like sentinels in deep shadow. Windows dark, except for one. The porch light of 117 was on, a pale yellow bulb that flickered as if low on voltage. I parked 50 feet away and killed the engine, leaving my headlights on. In the rearview mirror, I saw something move behind the porch railing, a dark shape. My own reflection was superimposed on it, half my face lit by the dash lights, half swallowed by the glass. I grabbed my flashlight and radioed, "Fremont PD, responding to possible disturbance at Elm 117, checking for occupants." No answer. Alone, I walked up the cracked concrete walk. The closer I got, the heavier the air felt, as though the night itself pressed against my chest. When I reached the porch, I saw muddy footprints in the chipped paint, matching the prints at the Waters house. I followed them around the side, flashlight beam jittering. The backyard was overgrown, a rusted swing set tilting in the breeze. At the far fence, I saw the Watcher, backlit by my cruiser's lights. That gaunt form, head angled, arms dangling. My breath hitched. I raised my flashlight. The beam hit it full on, and the Watcher paused, as though studying me. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. "Hey!" I shouted. "Stop right there!" My voice cracked through the stillness. It didn't move. Then, without a sound, it dissolved, smoke curling into the night air. I rushed to the spot, heart hammering. My boots sank into soft ground. There, imprinted on the grass, were those same muddy footprints. And at the center of the porch, a single dropped glove. Black leather, stretched as if someone had slipped it off in haste. I picked it up, fingers trembling. Inside, I found a single word scrawled in white paint. "Wait." I replayed the dashcam moment in my head, then lifted my radio. "Dispatch. I've got evidence. A glove with a message. I need backup and forensics out here." No response. My pulse ratcheted like a jackhammer. I tapped the mic again. Dead air. My cruiser lights flickered, then clicked off, plunging me into darkness. The overhead street lamp sputtered, half burned, until it too went dark. I sat there in the driver's seat, glove in my lap, flashlight discarded on the floor. My breathing echoed in my ears. Then my phone buzzed, a text. "You should have waited." Only then did I realize it knew I'd arrived. It knew I'd found something. My thumb hovered over the screen. I texted back, hands shaking. "Who is this? What do you want?" There was no reply. On my body cam, my voice rang out in hysterical breaths. "What? What do you want from me?" A soft crackle, then a whisper. "Tell them to stay away." I jolted upright, scanning the yard. No one there. The glove lay on the dashboard in full view, as though placed there by unseen hands. I prayed for radio contact, for lights, for sirens, anything to break the circle of silence. Instead, the glove's fingers seemed to twitch, and the word "wait" blurred and reformed as the letters stretched into something else. "Come." I slammed the door and ran, feet thudding on pavement, my breath ripping in my throat. I barely made it back to the station, where dispatch finally answered. "Unit 387, do you copy?" I keyed the mic, voice raw. "I'm not safe here. I need the lot secured. Make sure nobody's near that glove." They sounded distant. "Affirmative. Backup is en route." My reflection in the cruiser window stared back at me, eyes wide, haunted. I looked at the glove in my hand. Its leather was damp, slick as though I'd washed it in mud moments ago. I tossed it onto the dash and shut my eyes. When I opened them, the glove was gone. I left that shift early, claiming exhaustion. At home, I locked every door and window, laid out my weapon and extra magazines on the bed. I reviewed the footage again, every flicker, every glitch. Each time, the watcher appears precisely at 2:14 or 3:14 or 3:47, sometimes in the same frame as me, reflected in the glass behind my head, as though it's been standing there all along, watching. It isn't random, it's methodical. 3 nights ago, I found a photo slipped under my door. It was a picture of me, taken on patrol, me looking over my shoulder as I climbed out of my cruiser. In the background, just behind me, blurred but unmistakable, was that ghastly silhouette, leaning in for the shot. I don't remember anyone following me, holding a camera. It was as if the watcher itself had taken the picture. That same night I dreamed of a little girl, pale and silent, standing in the hallway outside my childhood bedroom. Her eyes were empty holes. She held out a tiny black glove, identical to the one I found, and mouthed the word, "Come." I jolted awake, sweat drenching my pillow. Now, I find myself at the station again, body cam recording, camera lights blinking red, taping my confession to memory. I brought the glove with me. I keep it in my pocket, its leather pressing cold against my hip. Ramirez and Monroe think I'm losing it. That stress and guilt over a missing girl in town have pushed me over the edge, but I know what I've seen. I know what I've felt. Last night, at precisely 2:14, the station intercom crackled without warning. A child's laugh echoed down the hall, a soft, eerie trill that shouldn't be possible at this hour, in this place. My heart seized. I stood, radio in hand, footsteps echoing toward the source. The hallway lights flickered. At the far end, the shadow pooled like spilled ink. The shape leaned against the wall, arms folded, head cocked, the edges dissolving into grainy static. I reached out, voice trembling. "Who are you?" No answer. Just that hollow laugh again, closer, knowing. My radio buzzed with static that resolved into my own voice, whispering, "Come find me." I shut my eyes for a moment, swallowed. When I opened them, the hallway was empty. The station intercom clicked off. Now I sit in the dark, gloves off, radio pressed to my ear, waiting for what comes next. The clock on the wall ticks toward 2:14 again, and I'm left to wonder, who, or what, is luring me deeper into this nightmare. The station was deathly quiet after that intercom crackle. Too quiet. Every desk light was off, every monitor dark, as if the building itself had exhaled and gone to sleep. I left the glove in my pocket, its damp leather pressing cold against my hip, and stepped into the corridor where the child's laughter still echoed, bouncing off the concrete walls in a chorus of static. My boots clicked on the linoleum as I headed toward the evidence locker. I needed answers, or at least something tangible to prove to myself that this wasn't all in my head. The dispatcher's office door was ajar, faint glow spilling from within. I pushed it open and found Officer Ramirez slumped over her console again, this time with a half-drunk energy drink beside her. The screen in front of her displayed the station's CCTV feed, rows of camera icons, all dark except one, the hallway where I'd seen that shape leaned against the wall. The timestamp glowed 2:17 a.m. I leaned over her shoulder. "Ramirez, can you pull up the recorded footage for camera 6? I whispered. She jolted awake, eyes wide. "Camera 6, sheer." She tapped the keyboard, fingers flying despite the confusion in her eyes. The screen flickered, and then the corridor came into view. I recognized the pale fluorescent bulbs overhead, the blue-gray lockers lining the right wall. In the frame, my own reflection passed behind an officer's silhouette. Only that silhouette was darker than shadow, its edges trembling like a glitchy transmission. Ramirez leaned forward. "What the hell? Jake, that's you." I felt my breath catch. There I was in uniform, walking past the camera with my head down, staring at the floor. Then, a second later, the watcher appeared behind me, motionless, head cocked. I spun around in the footage, but in the real world I was alone in the dispatcher's office. The watcher had slipped out of sight. "Save that," I said, voice low, "and make a copy on a USB." She nodded numbly, as if under a trance. I grabbed the thumb drive and slipped it into my pocket. I needed to see more. Logs, reports, anything that tied the glove and these spectral sightings together. I walked to the records room, 2 doors down, on the left, where file cabinets held every call log, arrest report, and incident summary from the last decade. I punched in the code, turned the handle, and felt the stale air rush past me, musty with old paper and the faint tang of mildew. I lit a flashlight, clicked open the first drawer labeled 2019 to 2020 incidents. I rifled through theft reports, noise complaints, domestic disputes, nothing unusual. Then I found a folder marked Unresolved Missing Persons, 2021. Inside was a brittle Xerox of a 15-year-old girl named Emily Carter, last seen leaving a Halloween party on South Elm. No witnesses, no leads, no closure. Her file included a photo, long brown hair, curious green eyes. I stared at her face, tracing the shape of her jaw. Under last known location, it said 117 South Elm Street. My pulse slammed. That was exactly where I'd been called on October 31st. The lighted porch, the muddy footprints, the dropped glove. I scanned the notes, a single sentence scribbled in blue ink by a rookie detective. Caller reported lights on, no one home, possible prank. That was it. The case had gone cold. I slid the file into my bag. By now, the hallway lights had begun to flicker on, automatic sensors kicking in as the station's timer cycled. I pocketed the flashlight and made my way to the evidence locker in the basement. The stairs creaked under my weight. Each step echoed like a gunshot in the narrow shaft. At the bottom, the door was locked, keypad blinking red. I punched in the override code, the same one I used when I needed to get a fresh magazine or retrieve a confiscated weapon. The lock clacked, and the door swung open into dimness. Inside, rows of metal shelves held clear plastic bins labeled Evidence. I found the bin where I'd stashed the first glove, labeled Glove, Black Leather, Case number 2023-102-Mercer Farm. I slid the lid off and stared inside. The glove was gone. In its place lay a crumpled scrap of brown paper with a child's scrawl. Note yours. My chest constricted. Whose handwriting was that? It looked like Emily's from the faded scan in her missing person file. I backed out of the locker, heart hammering, and slammed the door. The lock engaged with a metallic snap. In the corridor, the intercom crackled once, twice, dead air, then a whisper, "Find her." I froze. The voice was softer, almost gentle, but it carried undeniable weight. It was Emily's voice, or a memory of her voice in my mind. I raced up the stairs 2 at a time, bursting into the main hall where the computers hummed. Ramirez looked up, alarm flashing in her eyes. "What happened?" she asked. I ran to her console. "Listen," I said, thrusting the scrap of paper at her. "Do you recognize this handwriting?" She stared at it, lips parted. It looks like Emily's." She swallowed hard. But she was 15, that penmanship. I didn't let her finish. I grabbed my coat, the USB, and Emily's file from my bag. "I'm going back to Elm Street. You stay here and get that footage to Monroe. Tell him to check the logs for every 911 call to Elm Street since October. Everyone. And pull the old file on Emily Carter." She tried to argue, concern blurring her features, but I cut her off. "I need eyes on me. I'm going alone." My cruiser waited outside, engine idling. When I climbed in, I noticed the rear window fogged on the inside, though the heater was off. I cracked the window, letting cold air in. The threaded print of the glove in my jacket pressed at my side. I leafed through Emily's file again, her smile seeming to shift to a plea. At Elm Street, the porch light at 117 still burned, yellow and sputtering like a dying candle. The front door hung slightly ajar, its paint chipped in the same pattern as the footsteps. I left my taser in the truck, relying on my service pistol and my instincts. I eased up the walk and nudged the door with my boot. It swung open. Inside, the air was stale, like a tomb sealed for years. Wallpaper peeled in long strips, revealing lath beneath. The floorboard sagged. I flicked my flashlight beam across the foyer. No furniture, no personal effects, just darkness. I whispered into my radio, "On site, no movement, pursuing." Silence. I clicked off the radio and moved in. In the living room, I spotted muddy footprints leading toward the back hallway. I followed them, careful to avoid stepping in each print, as though it would erase evidence or break a spell. At the end of the hall was another door, painted white, its knob rusted. I eased it open. The room beyond was a child's bedroom, mismatched toys scattered on dusty carpet, a half-collapsed crib wedged against the far wall. On the floor lay another scrap of paper. "Help me." The handwriting was the same trembling scrawl. My throat closed. I checked the closet first, empty except for a lone coat hanger. Then I looked under the bed, dust bunnies and an old stuffed bear missing an eye. I sensed rather than saw a shape behind me. I spun, pistol raised. Nothing. But the door slammed shut on its own, jarring me. The windows rattled. The yellow glow from the hallway slipped in under the door jamb, painting 4 strips of light across the floor. I rammed the door open and bolted into the hallway. My radio crackled to life. "Unit 387, status." Ramirez's voice, now urgent. I didn't answer. I followed the hallway back to the foyer and froze. On the peeling wallpaper beside the door was writing scrawled in black, "It sees us." The letters were jagged, as though carved by nails. I swallowed bile. Behind me, something skittered across the room. A flash of black at the corner of my eye. I pivoted, flashlight beam slicing through the gloom. The watcher stood just inside the living room doorway, taller than the ceiling, limbs bent at grotesque angles. It tilted its head. My pistol raised on reflex, hand shaking. I squeezed the trigger. The round cracked through the air, no bang, just a dull snap, as if fired underwater. The bullet struck the far wall and lodged in plaster. The watcher didn't flinch. It stepped forward as if nothing had happened. Behind it, the words on the wall bubbled and shifted. "Why won't you listen?" My heart exploded. I turned and ran, feet pounding against the floorboards, hollow thumps echoing through the house. I burst out the front door into the night, rain spitting onto my face. I leapt into the cruiser and skidded away, tires throwing gravel. I didn't stop until I reached the station parking lot. I stumbled out, dripping wet, and raced inside to dispatch. The station was alive again. Monitors glowed, phones rang, officers patrolled the hall. Monroe and Lee stood by Ramirez's console, staring at the CCTV clip I'd sent. Monroe saw me and asked, "You all right?" I tried to answer, but all that came out was rasping breath. Then I realized Emily Carter had vanished from her house on Elm Street exactly 10 years ago, on October 31st, 2013, around 2:14 a.m. I'd just walked into the same trap she had. Now, as I sit here and type this into the recorder, the rain pounds on the roof like a warning. The glove in my pocket presses an urgent reminder. I'm not safe. And the watcher is no longer content to lurk on camera. Tonight, it invited me in, and I realized too late that I was the prey, not the hunter. I haven't stopped replaying the last 10 minutes in my head, trying to make sense of the impossible. Emily Carter went missing here 10 years ago tonight, October 31st, 2013, at precisely the same minute I first saw that watcher in my dash cam. And now I realize this place, these footprints, the scattered scraps of paper, the glove, that silhouette, they were never random. They were a breadcrumb trail leading me straight into her footsteps. When the rain finally eased at dawn, I sat alone in my cruiser, rain still beating on the windshield. My uniform was drenched, pistol empty, heart pounding like a jackhammer. I kept replaying her file, missing from her own home, never seen again. And here I'd been, feeling like I was hunting a ghost, when in reality I was tracing the path of a girl who never made it out alive. I knew I had one last choice: finish what she couldn't, or die trying. I grabbed Emily's file from my bag and turned to Monroe and Lee, who were still staring at the CCTV footage on Ramirez's console. Lee's eyes were bloodshot. "You okay, Thompson?" I locked eyes with him. "I'm going alone," I said. "Back to Elm Street, 117. I need to see inside Emily's bedroom, where she disappeared." Monroe shook his head, exasperated. "You're not thinking straight. You almost didn't make it out last time." I didn't answer. I unrolled the map of Fremont I taped to my clipboard, traced Elm Street, soaked in decades of police shifts, patrol beats, cold files. I pointed at 117. "This is ground zero. Everything starts and ends here." Ramirez, shaken but resolute, handed me a fresh magazine. "God help you," she whispered. I nodded, clipped the mag into my vest, and walked out without another word. By 9 p.m., I was back at 117 South Elm. Nights here had grown stale. No wind, no crickets, just the rancid smell of mildew and rot. I parked 2 houses down, lights off, and crept on foot. Leaf skeletons crunched under my boots. The porch light burned its weak yellow orb, flickering in time with my pulse. I slipped inside the foyer, flashlight low. The house had fallen deeper into decay. Paint peeled like dead skin. Floorboards groaned under my weight. But one detail remained pristine. In the bedroom where Emily vanished, the crib was intact, its wood polished smooth by the damp. Inside the crib lay a single doll, but an eye missing. On the mattress, another scrap of paper. "Help me." My chest tightened. I stepped closer. The paper was wet, ink run, but the letters were clear, trembling, HELPME. I touched it and felt the cold of the ink seep into my finger. A soft creak behind me made my spine snap straight. I spun, flashlight sweeping the doorway. The hallway beyond was empty save for a scattering of muddy footprints leading to the closet door. I swallowed, gripped my pistol. "Emily," I called, voice low. "I'm here to help." No answer, only the hum of my flashlight bulb. I took a breath and followed the prints to the closet. The door hung open halfway, darkness yawning inside. I flicked the flashlight beam in. Nothing but a child's dress hanging on a single hook, dusty and gray. Then I saw her, no more than 10 feet away, motionless in the far corner of the room. Emily's ghostly form stood behind the dress, her hair hanging wet and tangled, eyes bleeding dark tears. She wore the same party dress from her photo, pale pink, twisted with mud. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. I froze. She lifted a pale hand, pointing at me, then at the crib. I followed her gesture. The doll lay face down, an eye socket hollow. I lifted it carefully and pried out the stuffing. Inside was the second glove. Black leather, the twin of the one I found at the Mercer farm. I held them together. The stitching matched perfectly. Behind me a voice crackled, static, then a whisper. "Finish it." I turned, heart in my throat. The watcher stood at the threshold. In the hallway light, its form more defined than ever. I could see the slender limbs, the impossible height. Its head tilted in the same mocking fashion, empty black where its face should be. I swallowed. "Emily, what do you want me to do?" She didn't answer, but the watcher inched forward, arms outstretched. My brain screamed, "Run!" But I stepped closer to her, holding both gloves out. Her lips quivered. Then, in a voice like wind rustling dead leaves, she said, "Put them on." My hand shook so badly, the pistol slipped in my grip. I set it on the floor, helmeting my light over my head so both hands were free. I stared at the gloves, leather wet and cold, as though they'd just been dipped in the pond behind the farmhouse. I don't know. The watcher lunged suddenly, a blur at the edge of my vision. I flinched, and Emily shrank back. The crystals of fear in my spine shattered. I realized the watcher wasn't here to kill me. It was here to guide me. The glove-laden hand of the watcher hovered over the doll. Emily raised her voice again, stronger. "Wear them." I steeled myself, bent down, and pulled the first glove over my right hand. The leather hugged my skin, insidious warmth radiating up my arm. As I slid the second glove onto my left hand, the closet door slammed shut behind me, plunging the room into near darkness. Only the pale light from the hallway lit the rim of Emily's dress. I stood, gloves on, heart pounding, feeling something shift in the air, a ripple, like a breath. The floors vibrated softly. Emily's eyes met mine. She held out her hand. "Take mine." She removed her tiny, filthy glove and offered it palm up. Trembling, I reached out and swapped gloves, her glove for mine. The instant our wrists met, the air around me snapped like a live wire. A chorus of whispers rose behind my skull. Dozens of voices, children's voices, moaning, pleading, what felt like hundreds of them. The house moaned with them, as though centuries of trapped souls had woken and were scuttling through the walls. The watcher emerged from the darkness, its head tilted low, as if studying. The voices swelled into a crescendo and then stopped. Silence slammed over me. In that perfect stillness, I heard Emily's voice again, soft. "Thank you." Then she vanished, her form dissolving like paint in water, and the closet peeled open, revealing the hidden crawl space beneath the floorboards. I dropped to one knee, pried at the warped wood paneling, and lifted it. The crawlspace mouth stared back, narrow and pitch black. A stale, damp air exhaled from its depths. My flashlight beam danced across stacked crates and jars, evidence of something malevolent. Jars of human teeth, nails, bits of hair, yellowed scraps of clothing. I swallowed past a lump in my throat. My hand shook as I lifted a crate marked CARTER. Inside lay crumpled pillowcases. One had Emily's hair wrapped in it. The other held her missing eye. I closed the crate and stood, memory flashing back to Turner's story of waking to find the Watcher inches from his bunk. The Watcher, it seemed, was collecting something darker than fear. I realized, with a cold certainty, that the Watcher was not an entity to be fought or escaped. It was a curator of souls, and every person it found in its domain became part of its collection. Emily had been its first, and I was next in line. I backed away from the hatch, lightning fast, but the floorboard slammed shut behind me, pinning my chest. I spun to the doorway, but the Watcher had crossed the room and was standing less than a foot away, limbs bending grotesquely. My hands rose, gloves slick against the handle of my pistol, but my fingers wouldn't find the trigger. The Watcher lifted a hand, long fingers brushing across my cheek, and I felt a surge of agony, not physical, but mental, as though every memory I'd ever held dear was being snatched from my mind. Voices rose again, closer, humming at the edge of hearing. "Join us. Help me. Don't be afraid." I wanted to scream, but my throat was caught in a vice. I closed my eyes, seeing Emily's pale face, her tears of ink. I pressed my free hand against my heart, willing myself to stay conscious. When I cracked open my eyes, the Watcher had withdrawn, receding into the hallway. The door frame glowed faintly, as though illuminated by an unseen lamp. I felt an irresistible pull toward it. Leave or be left behind forever. Something inside me fractured. A whisper of relief. Escape. I stumbled toward the door, feet stiff, muscles screaming. My hand reached for the knob, it turned easily, and I spilled out into the hall. Instantly, the whispers vanished, and the lights returned to normal. The station intercom buzzed at the end of the hall, but when I tried to reach for my radio, the gloves vanished, bare hands trembling. I blinked. The hall was empty, walls painted institutional beige, monitors humming quietly. I'm back at my desk now, gloves gone, file on Emily open before me, recording this final confession. The hatch is closed. The crate marked Carter is still down there, somewhere in that crawl space. My pistol is on the console, magazine intact. I didn't fire a single shot. I feel a chill, as if the house is aware I left. And because of these gloves, because of that crate, I know I carry part of it with me. The Watcher's domain, its hunger for souls. I don't know if I can ever close this chapter, or if I'm now bound to Emily's fate, destined to join that collection. All I know is, tonight at 2:14 a.m., I will have a choice. Go out into the darkness alone and see what the Watcher wants next, or lock these doors, surrender the gloves, and hope it spares me. So I ask you, as I sit here in this dimly lit station office, lights flickering in unsteady rhythm. When you find a path marked by the lost, a glove left behind on a cold floor, will you follow it? Or will you let the door remain closed forever? Because once you step across that threshold, there may not be a way back, and you may not be the next to walk away. I never expected to be on cemetery patrol. When the sergeant handed me the assignment, midnight shift at Evergreen Heights Cemetery, reports of vandalism, maybe trespassers, I thought it was a desk job in disguise. I pictured a quick drive-by, a few flashlight sweeps, a radio call or two, and I'd be back at the station drinking lukewarm coffee by 1 a.m. But standing now behind the wheel of my cruiser, engine idling, I realized this shift would be anything but routine. I checked my watch, 12:03 a.m. The night was unnaturally still, even for a Texas spring. No crickets chirping, no coyotes howling in the distance, just the low hum of my radio and the faint hiss of fog rolling in from the east. I flicked the dome light off, clipped the mic to my vest, and stepped out. Gravel crunched under my boots as I approached the gate. Steel bars were slick with dew. My flashlight cut a narrow beam through the gray haze, illuminating a faded sign. Evergreen Heights Cemetery. Private property after dark. I keyed the mic. Dispatch, this is 4 Delta 3. I'm on scene at Evergreen Heights. All quiet so far. Static crackled back. Copy, 4 Delta 3. Be advised we've had at least 3 calls this week. Flower pots overturned, spray paint on headstones, tires slashed on vehicles parked inside. Understood, I replied, forcing my voice calm. I'll do a perimeter sweep and log anything unusual. I walked through the gate, heat from my breath rising in little clouds before it vanished into the fog. Headstones loomed in rows like silent sentinels, names and dates carved in marble and granite. Martha Langston, 1942 to 2003. Samuel Young, 1871 to 1959. A willow tree at the cemetery's center drooped low, branches brushing the ground as if trying to escape the earth. At the tree's base sat a toppled headstone, recent, jagged fracture. Rather than vandalism, it looked accidental. Still, someone had to explain why. I passed the damaged marker, crouching beside it. Moss covered the lettering. In loving memory of Thomas Avery, 1930 to 1998. The break ran diagonally, like something heavy had crashed down. I clicked a photo with my phone and jotted a quick note in my log. As I stood, a whisper of movement drew my attention, a flicker in the fog line beyond the willow. I leveled my flashlight. Nothing but swirling mist and the glint of metal on a distant marker. I exhaled. Probably just my eyes playing tricks. I tapped my mic. Dispatch, I'm proceeding south end. No sign of trespassers yet. The response never came. Only the soft, static murmur. I turned that dial up, down, silence. Lightning flashed on the horizon. Just a jagged line of brightness. The night air smelled of rain, though I couldn't feel a drop. Wind picked up, rustling leaves overhead into a low moan. I headed down the gravel path, flashlight scanning. Every headstone took on a new face in that beam. A crooked smile, a frozen frown, eyes that seemed to follow me as I passed. I reminded myself I was just a cop on patrol, not a ghost hunter. Half an hour in, I reached the old family mausoleum. Its iron door was slightly ajar, rusted hinges whining in protest. Coldness seeped from the opening, like the breath of the earth itself. I wrestled with the thought of climbing inside, but protocol and curiosity warred in my mind. If someone was squatting or worse, I needed to know. I radioed in, 4 Delta 3 to dispatch, mausoleum door ajar. Advise entry request. My finger hovered by the door. No answer came. I pushed inside. The flashlight beam revealed marble walls lined with crypts, each niche sealed with brass plates. Names. The Abernathy family. Early settlers of Travis County. Dust motes floated in the air. The door groaned as I entered, then slammed behind me. My heart pounded, chest tight. I spun, yanked at the handle, locked. Panic flared. I tapped the door with my knuckles. "Hey, dispatch, I'm locked in the mausoleum, requesting assistance." My voice echoed strangely, bouncing off the walls in mocking chorus. Silence again. I raised my light. At the far end, 2 cracks in the stone wall let through slivers of moonlight. Between them, I swore I saw a figure, the outline of someone crouched behind a broken panel. I swallowed, stepping forward. Concrete dust underfoot. The smell was sharp, like wet earth mixed with decay. "Come out," I called. No movement. My breath echoed. I edged closer until I could make out the shape. A gaunt frame, shoulders too narrow to be a man's or a woman's. Something else. I pressed the flashlight beam right at it, heart hammering. The figure slipped away soundlessly, falling through a gap between the panels. Instinct slammed into me. I sprinted to where it had been, yanked at a loosened stone. The gap widened. Through it, nothing but cold darkness. Below, I heard a faint scuff. I knelt, peered down. Gravel, soil. A slithering sound. My skin prickled. I scrambled back, rapped on the door, shouted, "Anyone out there? Open up!" But only my own ribcage thudded in my ears. Fear coiled around me, tight enough to strangle. At that moment, the door rattled open. I didn't wait to see who it was. I burst out, stumbling onto the lawn. Light spilled into the doorway before it slammed shut. Officer Jimenez, my backup, stood there, hand on his holster. "What the hell, Ramirez? You okay?" His voice was steady, but I saw the concern in his eyes. "Locked. I saw something. Inside." My voice cracked. I gripped the doorframe for support. He shined his light. "Let's get you back to the cruiser. We'll call a unit out in the morning to check that mausoleum." I nodded, too shaken to argue. Together we retraced my steps, but I stayed on the inside lane, flashlight sweeping every shadow. The fog had thickened, pressing against my cheeks. I felt watched. Back at the gate, I leaned against the cruiser, letting the engine's warmth seep through my uniform. Jimenez crouched next to me. "You good to go back in? I can cover the perimeter. You check the mausoleum again." I stared at the iron bars. My throat felt raw. "I don't want to." He nodded. "Then we call it. We'll tag it for morning. You've had enough." I thought of reporting a failed inspection, but my pride flared. "Number I'll finish. You watch the east perimeter." I forced myself upright. "But don't go more than 50 yards from the gate." He gave me a sideways glance. "Suit yourself. Radio if you see anything." I stomped back through the gate. The fog swallowed me. My flashlight trembled. Every step dragged like I was wading through tar. The mausoleum loomed ahead, its door now firmly shut. How quickly it had closed. I approached, tracing the lock with my gloved hand. No sign of tampering, except for an imprint of dirty handprints on the metal. I radioed, voice low. "Dispatch, Ramirez. I'm investigating the mausoleum door. I think—" My mic crackled, then cut out completely. My chest tightened. I punched the door pad with my shoulder. The lock clicked. I slipped inside. It was colder. Too cold. My flashlight beam tremored across the marble. I took a deep breath and stepped toward the back wall, where the crack had been. But the panel was solid. No gap. No evidence anything had moved. I shone the beam along the floor, seeking footprints, dust, disturbance. Nothing. I felt ridiculous. Heart thudding, I muttered to myself, "No trespasser. No vandal." As I turned to go, I heard it. A faint rasping breath behind me. I froze, pulse throbbing in my ears. I swung the light back. Nothing. I took one step and the breath came again, closer, almost against my neck. My skin crawled. I spun, saw a dark shape at the edge of my vision. Before I could react, it darted away, disappearing into a service tunnel beneath the mausoleum floor. I swallowed, my ribs constricted. This was beyond trespassing. A whisper drifted from the darkness. "You shouldn't have come back." My palms went slick against the light. I backed toward the door, only to find it gone. The wall was solid marble, no door, no exit, just stone. I swallowed. My radio was dead, my cell phone inside the cruiser. Alone in the mausoleum, fog pressing from above like a living thing. My boots scraped on stone as I turned in a slow circle. The whisper came again, faint but distinct. "Stay forever." A crack of thunder rattled the ceiling. Lightning flickered through the cracks. I raised my light. Its batteries sputtered. Darkness swallowed me. My last thought before the beam went out. I should never have volunteered for cemetery patrol. My lungs seized as the darkness swallowed me whole. For a heartbeat, I stood frozen, the beam of my flashlight flickering once before dying, plunging the mausoleum's interior into absolute black. The echo of my own breath sounded grotesquely loud, a ragged cassette tape stuck on repeat. My patrol training evaporated, replaced by a primal urge: get out, get air, survive. I fumbled at my belt for a backup mini light, heart pounding so hard I could feel it under my fingertip. Click. A thin cone of light spit from the pen lamp, casting jittery shadows across the marble walls. The air felt thicker here, as though each inhaled breath carried a weight that settled in my chest. I forced myself to stand tall, radio gripped in one hand, light in the other, and I began retracing my steps toward the entrance, or at least what I remembered to be the entrance. The stone floor underfoot was slick where moisture had seeped through cracks above, and somewhere far off I heard water drip in slow, deliberate intervals. I followed the vague dip in the tiles, convinced it traced the path back, but every corridor looked the same. A corridor of crypts stretching into more darkness. My flashlight beam danced across names and dates, reading like a chronological graveyard tour. I leaned in close to read one. Rebecca O'Connor, 1904 to 1928. My reflection flickered in the polished brass plate. Bloodshot eyes, sweat beating at my hairline, uniform stained with dust. I realized I was crouched by a closed alcove, not the open doorway I'd thought I'd entered. Panic nipped at my heels. I took a step back and nearly slipped on a fragment of stone. It clattered against the wall, and I swore I heard something scuff in response. A stifled, metallic scraping, as though someone, or something, was dragging itself toward me between the niches. My pulse ratcheted, adrenaline burning hot behind my eyes. I shouted, voice reverberating off the walls. "Come on, I'm a police officer. Open this door." The only response was a low, distant moan that might have been the wind, or might have been the mausoleum itself settling, its ancient bones creaking. I rounded the corner, hand trailing the wall like a blind man's cane, until my fingertips grazed cool metal. A grate embedded in the floor. I knelt, pried it loose, and peered into the yawning service tunnel below, a narrow shaft of darkness lined with bricks slick with moisture. The faintest glow of moonlight filtered through cracks at the far end. Hope flickered. This had to lead back outside. Adrenaline fueled my climb down. The tunnel smelled of rot and mold, uneven bricks digging into my knees. My backup light's beam caught the spiderwebs festooned across the ceiling, each thread dribbling condensation. I ignored the gooseflesh crawling up my arms and pressed on, inch by inch, until the tunnel veered and my flashlight caught the shape of a ladder built into the wall. Rusted iron rungs disappeared into the gloom above. Salty water dripped from the last visible rung. collecting in a shallow pool on the floor. I paused, pressing my forehead against the brick, fighting the urge to throw up. Then, determined, I hauled myself up. Emerging onto a ledge just above ground level, I found myself in a forgotten utility courtyard behind the mausoleum. A narrow passage of cracked concrete lanes, discarded pieces of pipe, and collapsed scaffolding. The fog from outside had crept in here too, pooling around my boots. My watch read 12:47 a.m., though I felt like I'd been trapped for hours. Radio still dead. I clicked off my pen light, switching to the full power beam. In that glare, I saw broken headstones laid flat, their fronts facing the wall as if someone had turned them to face away from visitors, or away from a presence only the stones should see. My training screamed, photograph, document, report, but the voice in my head whispered to simply escape. I climbed over a low wall into the main cemetery grounds, the beam slicing through the fog. The moon, when it appeared, was a sliver behind racing clouds. I worked to orient myself, recalibrating my mental map. Mausoleum to the north, gate to the southwest. But as I took steps, the axes lost coherence. The willow tree that should be at the center was nowhere in sight. Instead, I stumbled into a thicket of overgrown hedges, branches snatching at my uniform, tearing at my sleeves. I fought through, hand on my holster, breathing ragged, every sense on alert. Behind me, a low whisper. A single word, so quiet I wasn't sure I heard it until it repeated, "Lost?" A chill surged through me. I whirled, beam sweeping the dense foliage. The path I thought I'd cleared was gone, only gnarled roots and tombstone fragments. My compass, useless underground. I pressed the mic to my lips, voice unsteady. "Dispatch, Jimenez, anybody?" Nothing but static. Fear blossomed, thick and choking. I realized I was alone, truly alone in this maze of dead. I forced myself forward, each footstep a battle against panic. My pen light illuminated scratched symbols carved into tree trunks, primitive marks I couldn't identify, circles intersected by lines, letters that weren't English. I felt watched. Every rustle of leaves sounded like footsteps. My skin prickled. I tried to recall detritus from earlier in the shift, the vandalism calls, the spray paint reports. None mentioned occult symbols. This was different. I stumbled into a clearing where headstones formed a perfect ring around an ancient oak stump. Its bark peeled away to reveal a dark hollow. In that hollow, I saw something. No, someone. A pale face, hollow-cheeked, eyes empty pits. A child's face, mouth open in a silent scream. I froze. Reality warped. The figure dissolved like gauze in the wind. My stomach lurched with nausea and terror. I snapped a photo, but when I checked the screen, it showed only blackness. Heavy breathing behind me. I spun, beam searching, but there was nothing. Just the ring of stones, each bearing a single engraved initial. A, M, R, T, no full names, just single letters. The ground was littered with dried rose petals, faded red. I involuntarily swallowed, mouth dry. Somewhere behind me, the whispering rose to a chorus. "Stay, stay with us." I fled, crashing through underbrush, heart drumming in my ears. Branches whipped my face, mud spat up from my boots. The flashlight beam bounced wildly, catching glimpses of alabaster skulls half buried in the soil. I tripped over a root and went down hard, knee cutting into rock. A searing pain shot up my leg, but I pushed myself up, single-minded, get to the gate. As I broke free of the thicket, the gate appeared, my salvation. But it was no longer iron and steel, it was bone-white, glowing faintly in the fog. The latch stood ajar, inviting. I stumbled forward, hand outstretched, drawn by a force I couldn't explain. Then, as my fingers grazed the cool surface, a voice boomed in my head. "Don't go!" I recoiled, heart hammering. My light caught a figure leaning against the gate. Tall, shrouded in mist, uniformed like me but featureless. No badge number, no name tag, just a dark silhouette. I gripped my holster, ready to fire, but the figure lifted a hand. An impossible, elongated finger pointing past me, toward the heart of the cemetery. A low, mechanical clicking sounded, like the wind or gears turning in a long, dead clock tower. The apparition leaned forward, whispering through the air, "Your shift isn't over." My ribs constricted, every muscle screaming. The figure faded, leaving only the cold mist and the gate behind. I stood alone, tears coating my lashes, boots caked with mud and petals, flashlight beam shaking. The only choice was forward, back into the dark heart of Evergreen Heights, deeper than any patrol I'd ever imagined. And with each beat of my racing heart, I wondered, had I left at all? Or had I just crossed into something that would never let me go? My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the spot where that uniformed silhouette had dissolved. For a moment, the fog was so thick I doubted I could see my own hand in front of my face. Then, beneath my boots, the gravel shifted under me in a way it hadn't before, as if the ground itself welcomed me back inside. Every instinct screamed to sprint for my cruiser, to lock the doors, to radio an urgent white code to get me out of here. But the echo of that impossible voice, "Your shift isn't over," ringed in my ears like church bells at midnight. It left me frozen, torn between survival and a compulsion I couldn't explain, to obey. I drew a shaky breath and stepped forward. The gate, bone-white and spectral, parted silently as if it bore no weight. My hand hovered over the latch before I let it slip open. Stepping back into the cemetery, I felt the fog close in behind me, sealing out any hope of retreat. The moon, now completely hidden, left me to my own flashlight's beam, a feeble spear in an ocean of gray. I steadied my grip on the light and tried to orient myself by memory. North should have been the mausoleum, south the entrance gate. But the rows of headstones stretched on in every direction, angular and unyielding. Each step forward felt like a choice in pitch black, guided by intuition more than sight. My pulse throbbed in my temples, each beat pushing me deeper into the mist. Occasionally, I paused and listened. No wind, no rustle of leaves, just the internal sound of my own heartbeat and that distant, deliberate drip of water. I followed that drip, moving toward its source. The ground sloped gently downward until the air grew colder still, thick with moisture that clung to my hair and uniform. My breath came out in slow, visible puffs. Ahead, I saw the mausoleum's outline. It was the same structure I'd entered twice already, except now the door hung wide open, a maw in the stone face. A lantern lay on its side at the threshold, glass cracked, wick burned down to nothing. Beside it, my baton lay abandoned in the gravel, handle scuffed and wet. I knelt to retrieve it, voice catching as I murmured, "You want me in there?" "Fine." I slid the baton into its holder, steadying myself. Once inside, the air was thick and cloying, the drip turning into a slow patter as water fell from the vaulted ceiling into shallow puddles at my feet. Marble walls gleamed dully in the beam of my light, but where niches once stood, now interlocking panels of aged wood and metal formed a cross-hatched barrier. I pressed my palm against the cold surface. The grain was rough, splintered in places, warped as though it had absorbed moisture for decades. I tried to pry at one of the panels. It shuddered but held fast. "Jimenez," I called, voice hollow. This is Ramirez. If you can hear me, respond." My words fell flat against the sealed wall. A low moan tremored through the wood, a sound not quite human. I swallowed against the rising nausea. This wasn't just a broken door or a prank. Whoever, or whatever, did this didn't want me in or out. A sudden scuttling behind me made me whirl around. The service grate I'd used to escape was nowhere to be seen. In its place was a solid stretch of marble identical to the surrounding wall. The mausoleum had closed itself. Panic flared hotly in my gut. I raised my baton defensively, but the weapon felt foreign in my hand. Weightless, pointless. Then I noticed the floor. Fresh footprints pressed into the dust, leading toward the alcove where that gap to the tunnel had been. They were barefoot, small like a child's, but when I tipped dust aside there was only grime and water-smooth stone. No tunnel, no grate, nothing but the wall. My skin prickled. The footprints looped back toward me in a half-circle, ending at the threshold. I realized with a start they had appeared since I'd entered. Someone, or something, had walked this path while I watched. Under my breath, I whispered, "Who are you?" No answer. My flashlight beam quivered as I followed the tracks back to where the panels were. There, etched into the wood grain, was a name. E-L-L-A. The letters were carved deep and ragged, as though by fingernails. Goosebumps marched across my arms. Ella, just a name, but with it came a memory I couldn't place. A child's voice? A case file? My mind scrambled. I touched the carving. The wood was warm, unnaturally so, pulsing beneath my fingertips as if alive. My breath hitched. In that moment, the mausoleum's interior shifted. The niches rearranged themselves. Tomb closures lining up into strange angles. Shadowy corners where none had existed before. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. A soft cry echoed, or was it my own imagination? It was thin, trembling, so fragile I doubted I heard it correctly. "Mama?" The word floated through the mausoleum like prayer. My throat tightened. I thought of the family I'd called about a missing child earlier in my career. My own niece's wails echoing in telephone lines late at night. This voice stirred something deep in me. "Who's there?" I whispered, voice cracking. The cry came again, closer this time, a single lilting syllable. "Help!" It wasn't angry or malicious, it was scared, desperate. My training screamed to take radio control, call an urgent mayday. But how would I explain this? A child's ghost? A trap set by some prankster? The impossible reality of what I'd already seen made me question every protocol. I set down the baton and dropped to one knee, shining my light toward the sound. The glow hit something small standing between the tombs. A little girl, wet-haired, wearing a dress that looked yellowed with age. Her clothes were soaked through, edges frayed and stained. Her head lolled slightly, eyes wide and glassy. My heart dropped. "Ella?" I said, voice gentle. My hand went to the holster, but the thought of drawing my weapon seemed obscene. I swallowed hard. "Hey, sweetheart, can you tell me your name?" The girl's gaze flicked to me, lips parting in something like relief. Then her mouth twisted into a silent grief I couldn't process. She lifted one hand and pointed deeper into the mausoleum. My stomach clenched as I realized she wanted me to follow her. An instinct told me to refuse. Every terror I'd felt on this shift begged me to run. But I couldn't leave her there, if she existed at all. I rose slowly, light scanning for obstacles. The aisles between the tombs stretched like corridors, leading toward a narrow archway I'd never noticed before. Through it, I could see nothing but deeper darkness, as if the mausoleum contained another house beyond its walls. "Stay close," I murmured, voice low. "I've got you." I took a step forward. The headstones on either side rattled, as though something huge shook behind them. My light flashed across engraved dates, 1886 to 1892. A child's grave, Ella Avery, 6 years old. I remembered the shattered Thomas Avery marker outside. The boy's father, perhaps. The family plot must have been here all along. A surge of sorrow hit me. A father who lost his child, a restless spirit who roamed these halls. I forced my breathing to slow and pressed on. The archway led to a chamber lined with alcoves, each bearing a fragile wreath of dried flowers. A single candle burned in the center, flame guttering despite no breeze. Its wax pooled into shapes that looked like tiny curled hands reaching upward. I stepped toward it, each footstep echoing unnaturally. The girl, Ella, stood beside me, face expressionless. In the dim light, I could see her skin was almost transparent, veins like fine threads beneath the surface. She held out one hand, small and pale. My throat closed. "Ella, The candle snapped out, plunging us into near impenetrable gloom. My flashlight beam tremored, catching the girl's form one last time before she blended into the shadows. Then I felt it. A whisper in my ear, so close I felt warm breath on my neck. "Thank you for coming." My spine jolted. I spun, flashlight beam whipping around the chamber, but found only empty niches, the fallen petals of white roses strewn on the floor. The voice had no source, as if spoken by the walls themselves. My legs trembled, but I forced myself to step forward, to follow the scent of those roses deeper. Ahead, at the far end of the chamber, the wall was different. Seams between stones glowed faintly, like veins pulsating in the dark. A door outline shimmered there, almost imperceptible. My heart thundered in my ears. Was this the way out? Or a passage into something worse? Ella's voice drifted around me in childlike laughter, soft, echoing, inviting. I swallowed hard, throat dry. "Okay," I whispered, "I'm coming." Every fiber of my being screamed to stop, to turn, to find safety in the gate or my cruiser. But I took another step, curiosity and duty warring inside me. The wall pulsed again, beckoning. As I reached out, the floor shook. Just a tremor at first, then a rapid vibration that rattled the candle sconces and made dust rain from the ceiling. A deep, resonant humming filled the air, as though the earth itself had awakened. My flashlight flickered violently. The hush snapped into a roar in my ears. I hesitated, hand inches from the wall. Ella's laughter rose into a high, keening note that made my skin crawl. My rational thoughts scattered. I had no idea what happened if I passed through that shimmering outline, but I felt compelled, pulled toward it by the same force that had locked me inside. The mausoleum had claimed me, invited me deeper, and I wasn't sure I could say no. I pressed my palm against the cool stone. The surface rippled beneath my fingers like water, and the humming surged. My heart stalled. And in that breathless moment I realized there was no turning back. The gate, the fog, even my memory of the outside world felt distant. Ahead lay something beyond my training, beyond the living world. All that mattered was that shimmering veil, and the promise whispered in a voice that wasn't human. "Come home." My hand trembled. I closed my eyes, took a shuddering breath, and stepped forward, into darkness that welcomed me by name. The darkness swallowed me as I stepped through the shimmering outline, and for a moment I felt as though I'd fallen through the world itself. My breath caught, the stale air tasting of damp earth and something far older, something petrified and ancient that seemed to cling to every stone surface in this new place. My flashlight flickered. its beam cutting a jagged path through the gloom as I hesitated, hand pressed to the cool, pulsating wall behind me. Then a soft, tinny laugh echoed in the distance. Ella's voice, childlike, but layered with centuries of sorrow. I forced myself forward, boots scraping on stone that was both familiar and grotesquely warped. What I'd thought was the ground of evergreen heights was gone. In its place, a labyrinth of narrow corridors, each lined with carved niches filled with tarnished brass plates that bore no names. Some bore only numbers, 001, 002, 003. I recognized the sequence from an evidence locker at the station, but that made no sense here. I pressed my penlight's beam across one plate marked 027 and saw, etched faintly in pencil, a date, July 14th, 1994. That was the day I responded to a call about a missing child, my own niece. The case went cold, and I never forgot the panic in my sister's voice. My throat tightened. I followed the corridor left as the laughter guided me, uneven steps echoing. The walls bore flecks of mold and what looked like streaks of dried tears, dark rivulets that ran from ceiling to floor in irregular patterns. The smell grew more acrid, as though the air was rotting from within. At my side, the hush pressed in so tightly I could almost feel my heart thud against it. Around a bend, I glimpsed a soft glow emanating from beneath a low archway. Relief and dread warred in my chest as I approached. Inside sat an overturned patrol car console, a dashboard complete with cracked radio mic, frayed wiring, and a half-melted flashlight. The bench seat was gone, replaced by a heap of tattered uniforms. I recognized the badge numbers, 4 Delta 3 and 4 Delta 7, mine and Jimenez's. My gut clenched. I knelt among the uniforms and found the name tag Jimenez pinned to a scorched collar. The metal felt warm when I touched it, though the uniforms themselves were damp and slick, as if they'd been left under a running faucet. A soft whisper drifted, barely audible. "Take me home." I looked up into the gloom and saw, floating inches above the console, the faint outline of Ella's dress, yellowed and clinging to a form that wasn't quite solid. Her eyes, two bright slits in the darkness, locked onto mine. I swallowed, voice catching. "I'm trying, Ella." She raised a small hand and pointed beyond the patrol console toward another corridor. Numbers on the plates grew sequential. 028, 029, 030. Up ahead, the corridor ended in a chamber lit by a pale phosphorescence that pulsed in time with the whisper of my own pulse. I stepped forward, each footfall sending ripples through the stale air. As I entered, the niches on the far wall rotated, sliding apart like pages in a book to reveal a hidden room beyond. Inside was a scene that made my stomach lurch. Rows of chairs faced a raised dais, atop which lay a child's wooden wheelchair, its wheels encrusted with mud and rust. Behind it, etched on the wall in thick black strokes, was a mural of a crying woman, hair wild, arms reaching out in despair. Beneath her, scrawled in dripping letters, read, "I left her here, I never came back." My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, flashlight clattering as I pressed my hand over my mouth. The voice in the room swelled into a sobbing wail that resonated in my bones. "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "I'm so sorry." The mural's paint peeled, revealing layers beneath, faded scenes of laughter in sunlit fields, a little girl spinning in a yellow dress, a man, her father, smiling. The last layer was nearly obliterated by thick streaks of red, a snapshot of grief and rage. I realized this was Ella's story, A child left to die, a father who never returned. A case I'd closed on paper but never truly resolved. Suddenly, the chairs around me shifted, scraping on the stone floor, as though unseen bodies took seats. I stood, rising slowly, every muscle taut. The dais creaked under the weight of something unseen, and the phantom wheelchair rocked gently back and forth. I took a step toward it, heart thunderous. A voice, low and gravelly, came from the darkness behind me. "You can fix it." I spun, shining my light through the chair's empty rows. No one, only shadows dancing where no light should reach. My radio remained dead. My cell phone was useless. This was a world without reinforcements, without backup. I swallowed hard, gripping the flashlight so tightly my knuckles whitened. "What do you want from me?" I shouted. My own echo sounded alien in the hush. The wheelchair's wheels clicked and turned, as though guided by an invisible hand. It rolled off the dais and stopped at the edge of the chamber. The seat swayed toward me, inviting. Then, in the beam of my light, I saw on the chair's armrest a faded photograph. A young girl's face, mask-like in its innocence, eyes too knowing for a child. I recognized that face. It was Ella, but older, maybe 10 or 12 years, sitting in the same wheelchair. The photo was scratched across the surface by a line that cut her mouth into a mocking grin. I swallowed against bile and reached for the photograph. My fingers brushed the smooth glass, and a jolt of cold shot up my arm. The world tilted. The mural of the crying woman flashed behind my eyelids. I heard a sob so wrenching it felt like my own heartbreak made sound. I gasped, dropping to one knee, clutching the photo to my chest. Ella's voice, now clear and steady, whispered in my ear, "Free me." I looked up, and the chair was gone. The dais stood empty beneath its flickering glow. The niches on the walls turned again, merging into a single archway that pulsed with a soft white light. I stood, legs shaky. It was an exit, or a deeper descent. My penlight flickered, the batteries screaming their last gasp. A cold draft whispered through the chamber, carrying the scent of damp hair and old tears. I stepped toward the arch. My wrist ached from the weight of my service weapon. I saw Jimenez's flashlight propped against a chair, beam still lit, pointing at the archway. His handwriting, scrawled on a piece of duct tape affixed to the lens, read, "Don't trust the path ahead." My heart pounded. I realized Jimenez had found this place before me and paid a price. Sweat beaded at my temples as I fought the urge to turn back. But Ella's plea echoed in my mind. I owed her truth. I owed this forgotten child justice. I took a breath and stepped through the pulsing light. The world lurched again, the screaming hush of the mausoleum replaced by a roaring thunder in my ears. My body tumbled forward, limbs flailing, until I crashed onto cold grass under a night sky that I recognized as my own. I lay there, heart hammering, under a canopy of ancient oaks dripping with fog. Moonlight filtered through the branches, illuminating headstones and the distant curve of the wrought iron gate. The mausoleum stood behind me, black and silent, its door sealed once more. I pushed myself upright, every inch of me trembling. Jimenez's radio lay beside my boot, static sizzling in the speaker. I keyed it. "Dispatch, 4 Delta 3, status update. I'm outside the mausoleum, no sign of Jimenez. He's gone." Silence. Then, louder than any crackle of static, a child's laughter rang out from beyond the trees, echoing through the cemetery. High, bright, and impossibly close. It wasn't Ella's laughter anymore. It was something new, something waiting just past the gate. My flashlight caught movement, a shadow slipping between the stones, beckoning me onward. I swallowed hard, chest tight with dread and determination. My shift wasn't over. Not until I found Jimenez. Not until I freed every restless spirit chained to this place. And with Ella's voice still whispering, "Thank you," I took a step forward, back into the mist, toward whatever awaited in the dark beyond the grave. The night air closed in, and I realized some things never rest, and neither would I. I stepped beyond the gate's skeletal frame and into a widening pool of fog, my boots sinking into damp grass that whispered with every step. The cemetery around me seemed to breathe, the headstones tilting as though reunited in a silent convocation. Behind me, the once spectral gate solidified into cold iron again, sealing out the world I'd come from. Burning dispatch lights, the hum of passing cars, the comforting notion of daylight. I reached for my radio. Nothing, no static, no crackle, only silence. My flashlight's beam trembled in my hand, casting long, jittery shadows that flickered across names etched in stone. I forced myself to breathe evenly, to think with clarity despite the pounding in my temples. Jimenez's badge number weighed heavily on my mind. He'd risked everything to warn me. If he was still alive, I had to find him before the cemetery's darkness claimed him too. I picked a direction, westward, where the fog seemed thinnest, and pressed on. The air was heavy, laden with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. Every few steps I paused, listening for any sign of movement. A boot scrape, a ragged breath, the distant thump of a patrol car's engine. Nothing. My own heartbeat thundered so loud I was certain the spirits of the dead could hear it. About 50 yards in, I came to the old wrought iron fence that bordered the churchyard section. Its bars were half submerged in vines, and a gnarled yew tree leaned against it as if offering support. Beyond the fence I glimpsed a faint glow. Was that the beam of Jimenez's flashlight? I scrambled over a broken section of fencing, knees buckling as I tumbled into the church plot. The grass here was lusher, spring green in spots, but the fog turned it milky white as it curled around my shins. I called out, "Jimenez! Officer Jimenez!" My voice echoed off the church's stone walls, returning a hollow mockery. The glow was gone. I rose and shone my light through the tall, stained glass windows, amber, ruby, sapphire panels now opaque with grime. Ahead lay the church's side door, cracked open just enough for me to slip through. I hesitated at the threshold. Inside, the ancient pews were overturned, splintered wood strewn like fallen bones. Candles guttered in wall sconces, their flames tossing in a wind that wasn't there. The altar, once a place of refuge, was draped in black cloth, bright red wax spilling across its surface in shapes that resembled footprints. I swallowed hard. The door thudded shut behind me. I blinked, and the church grew silent again. I swept my beam across the nave, searching. At the far end, where stained glass had once depicted a kindly saint, the shattered panels formed a jagged hole, framing the night sky. Below it, a shape crouched in the shadows, a silhouette too deliberate to be a trick of light. I moved forward, baton at the ready, heart in my throat. "Jimenez!" My voice was hoarse. The figure didn't move. I stepped closer. In the beam I saw him, his uniform torn, face pale beneath a sheen of sweat, eyes wide with fear and relief. "Ramirez," he rasped, voice barely above a whisper. He held up one hand, trembling. "Stay back. Tell me what happened." I slid beside him, shining the light on his torn sleeve. He flinched and dropped his gaze. "They came through the walls," he said, voice tight. Whispering my name, they wanted me to stay. I followed his gaze downward. Between the pews, small footprints pressed into the dust, bare and child-sized. We were both frozen, staring at the floor. A soft, echoing giggle rippled through the church, as though it traveled on the stained glass wind. Jimenez swallowed. "Ella!" His voice cracked. She wanted company." I clenched my jaw. "We're getting out of here now." He shook his head, eyes darting toward the altar. "Not until we put her to rest." I frowned. He was right. The only way out had always been forward, by laying to rest the tormented soul we'd uncovered. "Show me where," I said. He led me down a side aisle to a trapdoor set into the stone floor, hinges rusted half open. Beneath it lay a spiral staircase carving into the earth. His flashlight flickered, revealing damp walls streaked with what looked like tears of blood. At the bottom, in a narrow chamber lit by a single lantern, lay the battered wheelchair from before, now overturned and broken. Next to it, half buried under rubble, was a red-stained doll, Ella's, I realized, her only companion. Jimenez knelt and picked up the doll with trembling fingers, brushing away debris. "Her heart," he whispered, as though speaking to something unseen. "It's still here." I shone my light around. The chamber walls were carved with scrawled messages. "Find her. Set me free. Father came back too late." One inscription stood out. "We never left the church." I inhaled sharply. "This is where it began," I said. "The service where they said the girl survived, but she didn't." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "They lied. He buried her body in the crypt, took her grief into that church, and never found peace." I swallowed, stepping into the chamber. The doll's glassy eyes stared up at me, unblinking. My hand hovered above it. "What do we do?" Jimenez looked at me, voice trembling with conviction. "We give her what she never had, a proper burial. We bring her home." I studied the doll, then glanced back up at the trapdoor. Moonlight filtered down the stairs. Fresh air whispered through the cracks. We could escape and call it a night, but the girl's sorrow would keep calling others. I nodded, resolve hardening. "We'll move her body," I said. "We'll bury her at her father's plot, where she belongs." He managed a weak smile. "God bless you, Ramirez." Together, we lifted the wheelchair aside. Beneath it, pressed into the dirt, was a small skeleton. Child-sized, curled in a fetal position. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to lean in, brush my gloved fingers over the remains. Heart-shaped locket around the neck, hands folded across the chest. Ella's. My breaths were shallow. Jimenez knelt beside me, eyes closed. "We're sorry," he whispered. "We're so sorry." I placed the doll in the skeleton's lap and snapped on yellow evidence markers. "Let's get her out of here." The spiral stairs felt endless as we carried the fragile remains upward. The church's hush closed around us like a cloak. At the top, we emerged into the nave just as dawn touched the stained glass in pale gold. The whispering stopped. The candles guttered out. I glanced back, half expecting to see Ella's silhouette watching us, but the pews were empty. Outside, the sun was rising over the wrought iron gate, burning the fog into rivers of light. We laid the skeleton and doll atop an old police blanket in the back of the cruiser. Jimenez took the wheel. I slid into the passenger seat, radio switched on at last. 4 Delta 3 to dispatch. I spoke into the mic. I have a 1041 with remains, requesting coroner and a chaplain to assist with a burial at Evergreen Heights. Ella Avery, cold case, identified. Repeat, identified. Dispatch crackled, voice clear and steady for the first time since midnight. Copy, 4 Delta 3. Coroner en route. Chaplain notified. Be advised. Graveyard shift ends at 0600. Good work. I closed my eyes for a moment, exhaustion washing over me. Jimenez glanced at me in the rearview mirror. pale light catching his hollowed cheeks. "It's over," he said quietly, but I wasn't so sure. Memories of the laughter, the opening walls, the silent pleas for company. They lingered in my mind like fingerprints on glass. The cemetery behind us lay peaceful in dawn's glow, but that peace felt fragile, as though it could shatter at the slightest touch. I reached into my pocket and retrieved the small locket from Ella's skeleton, the one I'd slipped off her wrist as evidence. I opened it. Inside was a faded photograph of a smiling child with curly hair and wide eyes. I closed it shut and pressed it to my chest. Jimenez glanced over. We did right by her. I nodded, but the weight in my gut wouldn't lift. Yeah, we did right. My voice was hollow, echoing in the enclosed cab. Outside, the world was waking. Birds singing, cars passing, ordinary life marching on as though nothing had happened. I stared at the locket, thinking of my own niece, imagining her fear, her final moments. I flicked the clasp shut and set it on the dashboard, where it caught the morning light. The cruiser rumbled forward, tires crunching gravel as we left Evergreen Heights behind. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd only moved her a short distance, and that in the fog dark of night, she might still roam, waiting for someone else. As the gate swung shut in my rear view, a single silhouette appeared in the archway. A little girl in a yellow dress, hand raised in a silent wave. I blinked, and she was gone. I swallowed hard. "Jimenez, did you see?" He shook his head. "See what?" I looked ahead, road stretching into sunrise. Nothing, never mind. But deep down I knew, some spirits never rest, and the cemetery's shadows are patient. Tomorrow night, or the night after, someone else will hear the whispers and answer the call. And the question that chased me as the city lights appeared on the horizon was this: who would believe them when they did? The moment I rolled up, the cruiser's headlights cast long, wavering shadows across the cracked concrete drive of that pale yellow ranch house on McKinney Commerce Road. I knew this call would be different. My partner, Martinez, sat in the passenger seat, his eyes on the radio mic as dispatch crackled with every call cue. It was 2:32 a.m. on August 17th, the summer heat still clinging to the air despite the thunderstorm that had ripped through 20 minutes earlier. Street lamps flickered, neon reflections pooling in the puddles, and the faint scent of rain mingled with hot asphalt and the bitter tang of adrenaline already coursing through my veins. We'd been on night shift for only 2 weeks, fresh to the rhythm of the graveyard hour, the hum of the air conditioner, the dull throb of the engine, the sweet, complacent quiet of a town asleep. Then came the call, urgent and clipped. A young woman alone in her home, hearing footsteps. Footsteps on the first floor. The line went dead before she could even whisper her room. That cutoff is the worst. No location, no clue. Just the panic in her breathing, a ragged inhale that sold a terror deeper than any scream. Martinez tapped his mic, voice low. "Mesquite 132 to dispatch, en route." I clicked on the patrol lights, blue strobes painting the walls in fractured shards, then spun the car around the last bend. The house sat half hidden by overgrown hedges and an old oak whose gnarled branches scraped the siding like fingertips. The front door stood ajar, a half-moon of darkness behind it. I drew my Glock, thumb flicking the safety off, and stepped onto the porch. Wood groaned under my boot, a warning. "Police!" I hollered, voice stretched thin. "Show yourself!" No answer. Martinez eased past me, flashlight in hand, sweeping beams across the foyer. The living room was pristine. Too pristine, as if staged. Cream walls reflecting our lights like a fishbowl. A leather couch faced a blank TV screen, coffee table gleaming with a single Coors Light can. Nothing stirred. Then a distant click, like a door latch, echoed from upstairs. My heart thundered so loud I could taste it. I motioned to Martinez. "Up there." He nodded. We moved in near silence, boots soft on the stair carpet. Halfway up, I felt sweat bead beneath my collar. Each step creaked, announcing us. At the top, 3 doors stood closed, uniform and foreboding. We split. I took the left, Martinez the right. My flashlight slice fell on a bedroom door, pale pine grain. I whispered, "On 3, then turned the knob. The door resisted, caught, then swung open under my boot. I jammed inside, gun raised, light dancing over empty floorboards. Nothing but an unmade bed and a toppled lamp. My pulse slowed, relief flickered, and then the silence broke. A slow, wet breath from the closet. Not a door creaking, but lungs pulling air, patient hungry. My blood froze. I squinted at the sliding bifold, a narrow slit where shadow pooled. "It's okay," I said, voice calm but tense. "Show me your hands." No movement, just that rasping inhale. I edged closer. The beam caught a pale cheek, pressed tight against the wood. A single dark eye met mine. I lowered my weapon, relief flooding me, until Martinez's voice cracked through. 132, I've got someone in the back bedroom." My stomach flipped. This wasn't the homeowner. Whoever was here had lured us in, hiding behind the doors while we searched. I called to Martinez. "Don't open anything else. I'll handle this." My hand shook on the grip as I slid the closet door wider. Inside crouched a teenager in ripped jeans and a blood-smudged t-shirt, holding a kitchen knife so tightly her knuckles were white. Her wide, darting eyes shone with fear, not malice. "Drop it," I said, stepping back. She glanced at me, lips parted in a silent sob, then let the blade clatter to the floor. I cuffed her, voice steadying. "You're safe now. We're the police." She didn't respond, only trembled until the cuffs bit into her skin. I glanced at Martinez, who stood in the doorway, gun still raised, face as pale as the moonlight spilling through the window. "Get her out," I told him, "and call for EMS." Outside, the night air felt too cold. Lightning flashed, illuminating the roof hatch I'd missed on my first sweep, the attic access yawning overhead like a secret mouth. My chest tightened. I radioed dispatch. 132 to dispatch. 1 in custody, possible intruder at large. Need backup for a secondary search. Martinez loaded the girl into the cruiser. I approached the house again, flashlight trembling in my hand. The front door closed behind me with a soft click. An invitation. I found the hatch key in the kitchen drawer. Small, tarnished, easily overlooked. It fit the lock, and the ladder fell with a thud that rattled my spine. Up, I climbed into darkness so thick it felt alive, like it was breathing. My light revealed scattered beer bottles and a damp stain on the plywood floor. Boot prints dusted in the corner tracked toward a small trapdoor, leading to the insulation above the ceiling. I crouched, pried it open, and a cold draft hit my face, an exhalation in the silent gloom. Below, dispatch arranged a perimeter. Martinez and EMS were sorting the girl's identity. But up here, time twisted. I followed the prints, each step crunching foam insulation, until I reached the far wall. Then came a whisper, closer than my own ear, someone breathing, soft and deliberate. I edged forward, a shape hunched in a shadowed alcove. My light caught a flash of denim, a glint of metal at the waist. "Don't move," I yelled, voice ricocheting off the rafters. No response. The shape shifted. I flicked on the attic light, the bare bulb buzzed, sputtered, and revealed empty air. The prints ended mid-floor. Nothing behind me but darkness and the stiff hum of my own heartbeat. I wanted to believe I'd imagined it, that exhaustion and adrenaline had played tricks. But the trapdoor slammed shut behind me with no one there to close it. I tumbled down the ladder, fumbling for purchase, and landed chest first on the top stair. Pain blared. I called for backup again, voice brittle. The hatch slammed once more above, like a final click of the lock. Dispatch crackled me. 132, backup en route. What's your status? I swallowed, breath burning my lungs, and looked back at the attic entrance. I need a K9 unit and CSI, I said. We've got someone, or something, still inside. As the first pale glow of dawn crept over the horizon, I stood on that porch, staring at the attic hatch, every muscle trembling. The girl in cuffs insisted she'd been hiding from intruders, but her eyes held no deceit, only terror. The real invader had slipped away into the Texas night, leaving me with more questions than answers. And I realized no one truly knows what prowls above, in the attic where darkness gathers, until it decides to let you see it. The sun was rising in shards of pink and orange when the K9 unit pulled up behind Martinez's cruiser. I stayed low behind the door frame, breath ragged, adrenaline still hammering in my skull. The morning chill had turned the damp Texas air crisp, but it did nothing to soothe the roar in my ears or the tight coil in my gut. I forced my legs to move, started down the porch steps, each footfall echoing like a gunshot in the quiet street. Dispatcher had already cleared the scene for a secondary search. CSI was en route too. I let the dog handler lead the way, the German Shepherd, Loki, his name, sniffing the front door before scratching at the jamb, ears pricked. Martinez stood beside me, wide-eyed and shaking his head. "Man, I've never seen anything like that," he muttered under his breath. I swallowed, nodded without looking at him. There was too much I couldn't explain. The girl in cuffs, that girl, whoever she was, had told us she'd taken refuge here after hearing strange noises, but her story was full of gaps. She'd insisted the homeowner, Anna Evans, was alive and inside hiding, yet Anna Evans didn't exist in any database since May. The utility company had no record beyond June. The mortgage office had no active loan, and neighbors said no one had lived there for months. Loki's hackles rose as he slipped inside on the lead, pulling his handler toward the threshold. I followed close, gun holstered now but ready, senses screaming. The air inside smelled stale, thick with dust and old smoke. My flashlight beam cut through motes of dirt dancing in the sunbeams slanting through the lace curtains. "Clear," the handler called, voice high. Loki barked once, then turned his head sideways, nose twitching. I crouched down, swept the beam under the couch behind the TV stand. Nothing. But Loki's hackles stayed raised. He didn't relax. "Did you see that?" Martinez hissed, pointing at a dark smudge on the wall above the mantel. A handprint, smudged and vertical, as if someone had leaned against the plaster. My light hovered over it. Fresh? I couldn't tell, but the shape looked disturbingly like a pale palm, fingers splayed. CSI pulled up moments later, a sedan with tinted windows, two techs in navy windbreakers stepping out with evidence bags and a tripod. I briefed them quickly. Girl in custody, possible intruder still inside, attic hatch found open. They spread out, snapping photographs and dusting for prints. It felt surreal to watch them treat the place like a crime lab, when 5 minutes earlier it felt alive with someone, or something lurking. I found myself drawn back to that attic hatch, its edges still carrying trace bits of foam insulation. I crouched beside it, shoving a gloved hand into the gap and pulling out a scrap of fabric. Dark denim with a jagged tear. I bagged it. Then, almost on instinct, I reached inside again and felt a collision of cold and wet. like I dipped my fingers into a cold sink. My palm came out slick with moisture, but the only logical source was condensation, right? The attic had no running water. I glared at Martinez. "Did you see this?" I held up my gloved hand. He shook his head. "No clue," he said. "I called EOD to check for leaks or animal droppings." He looked around the dim attic, then back at me, face pale. "Weird stuff." I climbed down, dusting off my knees. The CSIs were combing the ground floor now, vacuuming fibers, bagging the lamp from the upstairs room, swabbing around the closet doorframe where I'd found the terrified girl. The dust on the floor was thick. Too thick for someone to have just sneaked through without leaving more tracks. Yet those boot prints were there, leading nowhere, ending before the closet. I couldn't shake the feeling they'd been staged. I walked to the kitchen, absently tracing my flashlight beam over the counter where the key had sat. Martinez stood at the stove, running his fingers along the burner. "You really think someone lives here?" he asked quietly. "Like, permanently?" I looked out the window at the road, a sliver of dawn sky pastel above the treetops. "Dunno," I admitted. "Something's off. This house shouldn't even be habitable. No utilities, no hot water for at least 2 months. How was the girl here? She said she'd been hiding for days." The CSIs found her identification in the car, a high school ID from Mesquite High, dated 2018, with the name Rachel Mercer. She'd claimed to work at the gas station on Beltline Road, her safe spot when she'd fled the house. I asked the gas station manager, "Ever seen this kid?" He shook his head. "Haven't worked there 2 months. Kids aren't allowed inside after midnight." The online records showed no employee by that name in years. Back at the station, I processed her statements. Footsteps at night, a pale face at the closet door, a voice whispering from the attic. "Help me," she said. But help her from what? The real Anna Evans had vanished last spring. A missing persons report filed by her sister never found a body, never even a trace. The case had gone cold. But why did someone want me to find that house? Why did the intruder stage noises on the first floor, hide in the attic, and let me find the girl? To what end? Later, over stale coffee, Martinez and I pored through dispatch records. There had been no 911 call logged from that number since mid-May, yet dispatch swore they'd taken the call at 2:25 a.m. We replayed the audio, the girl's breath, ragged and near tears, then the line cut. No caller ID, no trace. It was like the call passed through a ghost channel. Maybe it was a prank call from some creepy YouTuber, Martinez suggested, rubbing his temples. The idea made me sick. You didn't prank 911 with a kidnapping scenario. That was a federal crime, and this felt all too real. Back on the street, I walked the perimeter again. The oak tree's limbs scraped the siding, groaning whenever a breeze stirred them. I shut my eyes and listened. Nothing but distant bird calls. Yet I couldn't stop the memory of that second breath in the attic, close enough to feel against my neck. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing the attic ladder, that narrow ascent into darkness. Every creak in my apartment sounded like boot steps. I got out of bed at 3 a.m., paced the living room, reaching for my Glock whenever a shadow flickered at the window. By dawn, I downed 3 cups of black coffee and felt more alert than I had on my last 10 night shifts combined. The next week, I went back to the ranch house with a warrant to search the grounds. Yard, shed, nearby tree line. Satellite images showed no annex, no secondary structure. Yet the girl swore the intruder had emerged from a hidden corner in the side yard and slipped into the woods. The trees were too thick to navigate in the dark, and by morning every footprint had washed away in the storm. CSI found something new in the attic photos. Tiny handprints on the floorboards, no bigger than a child's palm, that weren't in the first batch of photos. They were smeared in dust, no matching prints in the house. The CSIs compared them to Rachel's fingerprints, no match. Anna's file had no prints on record. The prints belonged to someone else, someone younger. I replayed Rachel's words in my head. She was here, right there, behind me. Behind her or behind me? I felt the weight of those words like a punch to the chest. I knew fear, but her terror had been pure and unshielded. The kind that came from seeing something you couldn't explain. A month later, the precinct assigned me to cold cases. I reopened Anna Evans's file, dusted it off like a skeleton in a closet. There was no new evidence, but I went back through witness statements. Neighbors recalling a van idling outside the house nights after Anna disappeared. A man in work clothes carrying boxes in broad daylight. Nothing conclusive. But my gut told me that man was connected. I contacted the utility company, asked for any record of that van. They had nothing but an old maintenance log showing a meter reader in June, wearing a blue uniform, face hidden by a cap. My dreams turned into nightmares. I saw a child's silhouette stepping from the attic into the hall, watched as the same pale handprint crept along the wall, reaching for me. I jolted awake, heart racing, drenched in sweat. I found myself back on that porch, rain slicking the wood, flashlight beam trembling. Last night I returned again, this time alone, unmarked car, plain clothes, but the house was gone. The ranch structure had vanished, replaced by an empty lot overgrown with weeds. I stopped the car, stomach twisting. I'd driven the route a dozen times, watched Google Earth the day before, house still there. Today, nothing. Was my mind playing tricks? Or had someone dismantled the building overnight? I stepped onto the lot, uneven earth, bits of concrete, no foundation slab. No attic hatch buried in foam, no traces in the grass. I called Martinez. His voice crackled, distant. "What are you looking at?" "There's nothing here," I said, voice shaking. "It's like the house never existed." He paused. "Send me the lot number." I sent it. He checked records. Parcel still zoned residential. No demolition permits, no code violations. "It's an empty lot now," he repeated, quiet. "Weird." I hung up, heart pounding. The sun was just cresting the horizon, turning the empty lot gold. I stared at the overgrowth where the porch used to be, shuttering windows where doors had once swung. A wind gust rustled through the grass, and I thought I saw a figure slip between the weeds, small, pale, watchful. Did I chase a ghost? Or did something chase me? I feel its breath against my neck even now, hear that faint, ragged inhale whenever I close my eyes. I found Anna Evans's sister 2 days ago, told her what happened. She stared at me, tears glistening. "Anna's gone," she said, voice hollow. "They found her body in the Brazos River last month." Her face was so bloated, I barely recognized her. My blood turned to ice. That body had never been reported. Coroner paperwork sealed for 40 days. Accidental drowning. No sign of foul play. Anna's house should have been cleared out, boarded up. The girl, Rachel Mercer, had described the house exactly. How could she? I report this to my sergeant tomorrow. He'll assign someone else to follow up, someone who won't see the eyes in every shadow. But I know what I saw, or what I felt. I know the attic exists somewhere. The smell of dust and rain, the soft scuff of fear. I know there's something in the dark spaces of old houses, slipping beneath floorboards, breathing behind closed doors.